Chapter 1027. Only Ravencase broke the magic crystal on the table with his sword. Wait. Our arcanists have never seen such a sophisticated illusion system. Who can guarantee that the information provided by you outsiders of unknown origin is true? Ronan was speechless. Reforming the magic image system and storing it, that was technology from 10,000 years later. He really could not refute it now. And who the hell are you? Which race are you? Don't think that your clumsy makeup can fool my eyes. Ravencase pointed at Ronan, who claimed to be Roddick. Even if we are willing to believe that the Queen is involved in this operation, it does not mean that we, the noble Cador, will believe you guys of unknown origin. Stubborn, arrogant. It was a guy like Ravencase who had great influence in the upper echelons of the entire Cador Empire. The feudal lords who were filled with righteous indignation immediately distanced themselves from Ronan and Vanessa. At this time Tyrande walked out, and it was obvious that her clenched fists were shaking. Look at the situation. In the face of such a strong enemy, you still have the mood to play your noble politics? This is no longer something that we, Cador, can handle alone. We need to contact all the forces that can be united. Ravencase waved his hand. No, we have had enough of suspicion and betrayal. We are the High Elves, we are born to be noble rulers. Even if our Queen is deceived for a while, only the High Elves are qualified to polish the Queen's eyes. I, Ravencase, the Lord of Fort Raven, propose once again, eliminate the treacherous Savis. And after this war, in the name of the Queen, we will implement a parliamentary system. The Queen will still be the supreme head of Cador in name. Ravencase's eyes were sharp. As for those huge alien monsters, we will use our swords and magic to tell them how Cador occupied the most fertile land on this planet. How did they occupy it? Of course, from the hands of the trolls. With swords. With bows and arrows. With invincible magic. Ravencase raised his arms and shouted, and the feudal lords cheered in unison. Tyrande, Malfurion, Ronan, and Vanessa were all silent. Ravencase said arrogantly to Tyrande and Malfurion, "You can choose to join us or not." Without even replying, he led a large number of lords out of the military conference room. Ronan muttered in human language, "Is this fate? Or is it that the power of tradition is so deeply rooted and unbreakable?" Vanessa clearly had a different opinion. But Master still revolutionized the entire alliance. Those who don't fit the times will eventually be eliminated. Ronan suddenly shuddered. He somewhat understood what Vanessa meant. Those who tried to stop the wheel of history were destined to be crushed by destiny. No one could save them. All we can do is unite the remaining purer forces that can be united. 3 days passed, and Ravencase managed to pull out an army of more than 300,000 Cadores. They gathered into a surging torrent and marched towards the half-destroyed Azhara city. At the same time in Azhara, Grom was very depressed. Even though he knew that this was part of Duque's plan, even though he knew that patience would bring him greater rewards, the Burning Legion badge on his chest still made him feel ashamed. This was not the first time he had seen a demon. In his eyes, the seemingly huge and terrifying Cerberus was just a swing of his axe. The clever-looking demon guard with a huge horn and a demon's face was also a swing of his axe. In reality, he could only swing his axe at any demon. But with these demons gathered together, he could not swing his axe much. This was because this group of demons was not a pile of loose sand but an army. Without the support of his comrades, he believed that he would only be able to kill 100 demons at most before he died. This made Grom feel depressed. Strolling along the long corridor of the palace, as he approached the palace with the few teleportation portals, more and more demons surged out from the palace gates. He was not surprised that the huge and beautiful building in the eyes of the elves was undamaged. Just as Duque had told him, most of the elves who had fought alongside him 10,000 years later were now conspirators of the Burning Legion. Grom could see the guards standing in a neat row by the wall. As he got closer, he could even see the twisted and terrifying joy in their eyes under such a creepy scene. Their silver eyes were all red, and some looked like they could not wait to become part of the demons and join this demon army that had destroyed their home. Grom felt a wave of disgust and quickly turned away. On the side of the palace, he noticed that the High Elves' residence was completely preserved. Some of the Queen's servants were even walking from room to room as if nothing had happened around them. Walking quickly to the teleportation area where Duque was, Grom resisted the urge to kill the two apocalypse guards at the door, entered and saw Duque. Seeing that there were no other demons around, Grom whispered to Duque, "I've had enough." Duque laughed. It was really hard for a fierce general like Lord Roar to play the dirty game. "Oh. Do you like war?" Grom was stunned. He could not read Duque's thoughts. After a moment of silence he replied, "I do. Those night elves who overestimate themselves have formed an army. Of course this is nothing to worry about. What I'm concerned about is that according to the latest information, they seem to have one of your compatriots." Duque laughed sinisterly. Compatriots? Grom's two bell-sized eyes widened. Of course he knew that Duque was referring to Brock. Duque, who had transformed into a shadow priest, laughed sinisterly as if he was the most evil incarnation of darkness. "I use my mind to control and torture you. You're unhappy too, aren't you? My slave, I'll give you a chance to be free now. Go kill your compatriot and you'll be free. Or you'll be killed by your compatriot. As for the future, it's up to you whether you want to escape or raise your axe against me or the Burning Legion." You demon. Grom finally had some talent for acting. He understood that Duque wanted him to jump back to the righteous faction during the war. Would he get rid of Brock? Of course not. As someone who had worked with Tyrant and Malfurion before, Grom knew very well that the High Priestess of the Moon Goddess had a way to calm the mind and dispel negative mental states. Chapter 1028. Scram. Duque snickered and snapped his fingers. Soon a succubus came in. "Lord of the Infernal Tunnel, did you call for me?" "Yes." "Put this dirty beastman into today's team. If he shows any signs of rebellion, then execute him." "Understood." With that, Grom left with the succubus with a complicated expression. At this moment Duque suddenly sneered. "Come out, I've already noticed you." He. "How rude of me." The ones who came out were naturally the Gemini Alida. Duque's face, shrouded in dark power, had a domineering arrogance. "What, do you have a problem with me punishing my own servant? Your servant seems to be quite strong. Is it really good to give up just like this?" Duque was not surprised by the chain of questions from the telepathic Gemini. The dark aura on Duque's body became more and more vigorous. Just being 10 meters away from Duque made one feel like they would be devoured by the dark magic. "It doesn't matter. To me he's just an object to be thoroughly studied. He has long lost his greatest value. After becoming a Void Lord, I can have as many powerful servants as I want. There are at least 24 high elven mages outside the door eager to lick my shoes." Elise's narrowed her eyes. "Aren't you afraid that your servant will really rebel and cause trouble for the Burning Legion?" Queen Solola's chuckled. "Who knows, the sin of a servant's betrayal might be on your head." Duque snorted. "Lord Archimond is about to descend. As long as I complete my mission, who will make things difficult for me for my test subject?" The Gemini was a little speechless. Duque had grown too quickly. From an inferior race that popped out of nowhere, he became the Lord of the Burning Legion in one leap. Now the credit for opening the portal was going to fall on his head. But he also knew the way to survive in the Legion. Yes. As long as he completed Kill Jaden's strict requirements and did not betray the Legion, he could be forgiven, or even deliberately ignored, no matter how big his mistake was. The credit was greater than anything else. There was even a hint of jealousy in Gemini's heart. Perhaps another lord would have been able to claim the credit of Duque's achievement. The problem was that the other lords did not have such a high adaptability to Azeroth as Duque, nor did they have the spatial magic ability to create a portal like Duque. If a lord whose power had been greatly reduced had descended here, he might not have been able to subdue Savis and Queen Azhara, and he wouldn't have been able to build the teleportation portal so quickly. At this moment, a terrifying will descended. Duque and Gemini bowed at the same time. "Greetings, Lord Kill Jaden, Master." "Infernal affairs. How long will it take to build a portal that allows Archimond to pass through?" Kill Jaden's huge crimson shadow almost filled up the hall that was at least 200 square meters. The shadow was so realistic and filled with a sharp pressure. Duque and Gemini didn't even dare to raise their heads. Duque replied in a serious tone. "In the best-case scenario, we need to purify the water from the Well of Eternity that has been polluted by the High Elves before opening it. That will take 14 days. I'm asking for the fastest time. Kill Jaden seemed a little impatient. Duque glanced at the Eridar demon wizards around him. If I just want them to help me purify the magic and let me control and build the portal, that will take 3 days. Working together, 7 days. Kill Jaden's left eye clearly narrowed. He knew that this fellow called Infernal Affairs had high attainments in spatial magic. But Kill Jaden would never put the fate of his people in the hands of an outsider, even if this outsider seemed to be very loyal to the Burning Legion. If Infernal Affairs did something to the portal and suddenly closed it when only a third of the Burning Legion's troops had passed through, that would be a huge problem. At this time, the Dragon Guardians of Azeroth were not to be trifled with. Then let's play it safe. 7 days. As long as the Arc Herons arrive, the Burning Legion's victory will be irreversible. Duque bowed and replied at the same time, in these 7 days I need to focus on the construction of the portal and will not have time to care about other things. I believe that the enemy will find a way to break Azeroth's seal on the magic veins. I hope to strengthen the defenses in this area. Kill Jaden looked at the Eridar twins with a pair of fiery eyes. I'll leave the protection of the magic veins to you. Yes. The Gemini replied with a lowered head. Infernal Affairs. As long as you open the portal, you will be the one to take the lead. I will give you an additional reward. As long as it suits your status, you can have it. Kill Jaden was indeed the best at ordering people around. Just as he threw a big stone called Overtime on Duque's shoulder, the Gemini immediately hung a carrot to lure him. Duque smiled and did not say anything. Under normal circumstances, it would be a waste for the Gemini to be a guardian. But this was obviously not a normal situation. He knew very well what trump cards the enemy had. Right now he was digging a big hole for the Gemini to jump into. In any case, he had a good reason. I'll let Manaroth command the battlefield. Infernal Affairs will focus on opening the portal, and the Gemini is the most free. Can you look after the seal for a few days? The Gemini could not find a reason to refuse. After all, once Archimonde arrived with the Burning Legion's past experience, they would definitely win. Hehe. In the end it would become, it's not that we didn't work hard to suppress the bandits, but the bandits have Gundams. Almost at the same time, Tyrant and Malfurion looked at the majestic elven army, their faces full of worry. Tyrant even gritted her teeth. It's impossible to win. Look, our so-called elites can't even stand steadily now, and they actually have to rely on the remaining power of their mortal bodies to fight those huge demons. Malfurion sighed deeply. You're right. An army of 300,000. This was definitely a powerful force to be reckoned with in the mortal world. But after seeing those huge, terrifying demons that looked like they were born to be fighting machines, Tyrant no longer had any hope for this army. Now Tyrant fell into a deep state of confusion. When the demons came out, the High Priestess of the Elune Sisterhood happened to be in Azhara City. Her desperate cries before her death were transmitted to her and the other priestess through the spiritual network left by the goddess. She really wanted to participate in this battle, but she had not received a response from Elune yet. Malfurion made a decision. No. I want to go to the Emerald Dream. Chapter 1029. The blazing hot wind blew on the ground full of gravel and ashes, rolling up the dust like waves, layer by layer, whistling and blowing into the distance. In the northwest of Azhara, a huge army was slowly advancing along with this gale. 300,000 elves sounded like a lot, but in reality this was only a small part of the army of the huge Night Elf Empire. Because of the speed of mobilization, Ravenkaze could only gather the lords closest to Azhara. The lords further away needed a month or even several months to get here. This was not an exaggeration. 10,000 years ago in Azeroth, this was the period when the Night Elf Empire was at its strongest. Kaldorii occupied nearly 80% of the territory of the ancient Kalimdor continent. The former Amani Troll Empire was only left in the northeast corner of the continent, struggling at death's door with Swaman as a line of defense. The once glorious Gurubashi Empire was split into 2 parts, Zul Farak in the southwest and Zul Gurub in the southeast. If the Night Elf Empire mobilized, it was still possible to gather 3 or 4 million troops. Of course, the quality would definitely be uneven. To be able to gather 300,000 people in such a short period of time was already an amazing rallying power of Lord Ravenkaze. Unfortunately, when facing the burning legion, Ravencase only felt a little. Was there too few people on his side? The demons wreaked havoc everywhere. They burned down every house and forest, slaughtering every living creature within their sight. From afar there was a flood of hellhounds howling. Behind these hound demons, blue-skinned demon guards also gathered there. When they saw the rows of night elves at the end of their line of sight, they all howled happily. Although chasing and destroying fleeing prey was also a kind of pleasure, large-scale slaughter was what demons loved the most. Today, more innocent people would be killed, more blood would splatter, converge into a river, solidify into a lake. Awoo! After the leading giant hellhound elite let out a chilling cry. The demons advanced towards the neat and orderly line of elves. Ravencase nodded. "Archers, get ready," a noble shouted. Under the leadership of an archer who had obviously stepped into the realm of heroes, more than 38,000 longbows were raised high, slanting towards the sky. The nobleman tossed a handful of fluff above his palm. Looking at the direction in which the fluff had drifted, the noble continued to shout, "Level 3 wind 10 degrees east." Awoo! Even though they were against the wind, the chaotic howls of the hellhounds as they ran at full speed formed a huge sound wave that pounced towards the elves. Some of the new soldiers who had never been on the battlefield almost couldn't hold their bows steadily, but those experienced marksmen knocked 3 arrows on the bowstrings in one go. The elf noble raised his hand high and looked forward. The group of demons was getting closer and closer, and he suddenly swung his hand down. Shio shio shio. The continuous sound of breaking wind formed a terrifying long sound. Accompanied by the shocking shriek of the Grim Reaper, more than 100,000 arrows formed a huge black cloud that stretched for several kilometers and suddenly rose into the sky. When the flashing arrows reached the highest point, under the effect of gravity, the sharp arrows were like a summer shower, pouring down on the demon's body. From afar, it looked like a gigantic Grim Reaper, opening its arms to embrace the devils. The devils weren't brainless creatures. However, even though they knew that death was in front of them, the burning legion still didn't slow down. The torrential rain of arrows suddenly fell. The devils of the burning legion were indeed demons, but they still had physical bodies. They weren't invincible. The first round of arrows almost completely covered the hellhounds. Some of the hellhounds had so many arrows stuck in their bodies that their corpses couldn't even lie flat on the ground. The hellhounds fell to the ground and died. Nearly 200 apocalypse guards also fell from the sky. However, the burning legion devils stepped on their comrades' bodies as if they were stepping on a stepping stone that had nothing to do with them, and they passed by at high speed. The hellhounds ignored their dead comrades. In their eyes, there was only greed for the night elves. They roared and continuously sped up with the momentum of participating in a carnival. "Damn it!" Ravencase cursed. "Fire at will. Quick." The hellhound's acceleration exceeded the imagination of this veteran night elf overlord. Usually, even if it was a cavalry charge with the night elf's hand speed, they could shoot at least 4 to 5 rounds of arrows. However, those damned hellhounds suddenly accelerated and disrupted everything. Fire. Fire at will. The archers gave up on aiming accurately and loosened the bowstrings in their hands almost as soon as they were ready. The arrows of death shot towards the group of devils again, but the effect was obviously not half as effective this time. The hellhound in front of the hellhound agilely made evasive maneuvers with irregular steps, increasing the distance between it and its companion. The demon guards at the back actually raised their huge shields and formed a standard carapace formation. These aren't just beasts. They're practically war machines. A noble beside Ronan roared. "They learn too fast." Ravencase ignored this guy. After the third round of shooting, all archers retreat. Infantry to deal with the impact. Mages who can still cast spells cover. Lancers, prepare to charge. "Your Excellency," Ronan suddenly shouted. "Can I participate in the battle?" "At this time, mage, you can do anything. As long as you don't attack us elves. Go." Ravencase originally wanted to refuse out of pride, but after the magic of the Well of Eternity was cut off, almost all the mages under him became dead dogs. The Great Lord, who was incredibly vexed, answered almost casually. He had no idea how terrifying the pharaoh he had released was. Ronan flashed to a high slope. Below him were 5 rows of infantry. The night elf infantry held the long and narrow kite shields that looked impressive but were useless, forming a shield wall that Ronan looked extremely weak. There were no 3 rows of spears, no reserves. Ronan had no idea how these guys would die if they were attacked by the hellhounds. Knowing that the hellhounds' magic resistance was insanely high, Ronan sighed. He concentrated and cast a spell that he would rarely use in normal times. This was a large-scale spell that he would definitely not be able to use without any equipment. However, he felt the magic amplification from the excellent equipment that the various demon lords of Mount Hyjal had contributed to him. Ronan firmly believed that he could still do it. His eyes narrowed. The ground in front of the burning legion cracked open, rocks exploded and dust was everywhere. The next moment, from the sky full of dust, a sharp stone wall that was a full kilometer long covered the center of the battlefield from left to right, as if 10,000 large hedgehogs had appeared out of thin air, blocking in front of the hellhounds. Chapter 1030. If the charge of the hellhounds was like a torrent spurting out of a great river, then Ronan's earth spell would be an artificial dam that appeared out of nowhere. Like a row of heavy cannons bombarding the dam, the tide of hellhounds was a perfect performance of what was called raging waves beating the shore. Perhaps the repeated attacks day after day, year after year, would shatter the reef on the shore. But at this moment, it was only the tide itself that was shattered. All agility-type movements required space to be executed. Even the most agile existence, once it lost the space to make a detour, what awaited it was the most hated, the unfancy collision. The hellhounds at the front instinctively wanted to go around or over. But in the end they were still pushed to the front by the hellhounds that couldn't stop, and their companions at the front line crashed into sharp stone spikes as if they were driving a pile of piles. Indescribable howls resounded in the middle of the battlefield. On many solid spikes, there were often a dozen or so hellhounds that hadn't completely lost their lives. At this moment, Ronan began to chant the second battlefield spell. The source of all magic. Come and go with my mysterious meaning and open a path of fire that destroys everything. The purplish-blue arcane energy turned into gorgeous runes that formed dazzling rune ribbons around Ronan, circling his body in a clockwise direction. Supported by a set of dazzling, exquisite equipment, and the special effects of unruly will and other strengthening accessories were fully activated, the little remaining magic power was all compressed and poured into the next attack. 10 seconds later, a huge magic dragon of fire crossed the crowded front of the hellhounds and flew directly above the group of demon guards that were lined up because of the shield and turtle shell formation. Boom! A huge mushroom cloud rose in the formation of the demon guards, and in the elves' vision at least 100 demon guards were blown into the sky. More were turned into ashes in the direct hit of the explosion, and the rest were either blown into pieces and scattered, or simply fell to the ground motionless. The stones on the turf were also blasted away. A boulder fell on a Cerberus, crushing its spine like breaking a twig. The advance of the burning legion's main army in the middle had been stopped. These ferocious demons were obviously in a mess. No matter how picky Ravencase was, he could not help but praise Ronan's performance. Good job. The archers made use of this opportunity to fire another volley of arrows at the hellhounds that were huddled together. A large number of arrows rained down and the scene became even more chaotic. The night elves cheered. The moon guards looked at Ronan jealously. Ravencase roared at his mages, telling them to act quickly. However, it seemed like the night elf mages were far inferior to Ronan. That's right, an entire team of 500 mages couldn't even compare to Luo Ning. Having fought on the loads of the Well of Eternity for a long time, the elven mages had inexhaustible magic power. They would subconsciously study their own casting skills instead of expanding their magic circuits so that they could store and refine more magic power on their own. According to Duque, these guys had frighteningly short mana bars. The elemental magic that descended on the Burning Legion weakened from time to time. A large number of demons fell to the ground, but more demons surged forward. The magic offensive that was supposed to be a suppressive area attack and turn a certain area into an absolute dead zone seemed extremely weak. The central battlefield that Ronan plowed through with his ultimate skill was fine. There were no fortifications around it, and the night elf infantry that directly met the enemy with a shield formation showed a one-sided decline. In front of the more agile and stronger demons, the elven infantry easily made trades that shocked every commander. Many times, it took 5 elven infantry to exchange for the death of a Cerberus. Until this moment, the elven lords felt a little regretful. They should have thought of a way, whether it was spies or thieves, to restore the magic supply of the Well of Eternity before going after the Burning Legion. On the left flank, the Moon Guards led by Illidan were fighting, and the situation was still somewhat manageable. After all, these Moon Guards who chose to support the Lord and rescue the Queen, even if they had lost their magic power, were still highly trained warriors. The right flank was in a difficult situation. At the worst time, even the supreme leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius, had to fight on the front line. As the Burning Legion further increased their troops, especially after the appearance of the Lord of the Abyss, the Night Elf army showed signs of collapse. Just as the Elven army was on the verge of collapse, a mysterious existence in a special way visited the inner city of Azhara, which was under high security. There was a sentry every 3 steps, and a sentry every 5 steps was not enough to describe the security of this place. Around the palace, the elven guards in green armor, armed with spears and swords, carefully looked around. But they were not the core of the security net. Countless Cerberus ran back and forth almost irregularly. There were multiple Void-Eye demons patrolling every important position. Eye demon, a special demon that could cross space and see very far away or see through things hidden in the void. At first glance, it was no different from a huge and ferocious eyeball. They just floated in the air, scanning every corner of the inner city of Azhara. With them here, even a hero-level thief like Vanessa could not even think of taking half a step in. Even though the defenses of the Burning Legion were so exaggerated and strict, a special existence still entered. He flew over the Well of Eternity lightly, looked down at the huge pool of black water, and slowly ascended to the tall and majestic Forbidden Palace that stood on the cliffs of the mountain. When this palace was first built, stones and trees were combined together with magic. Such a miracle touched the hearts of countless people, but now it was daunting. It was another stormy night, and an even more uneasy and evil atmosphere hung around it. The elves did not dare to stare at it, and even if they did, they would quickly look away. Except for the mysterious intruder. Yes. He was Malfurion Stormrage, whose soul had left his body and existed in a strange form between the Emerald Dream and the real world to sneak into the Azhara Palace. Malfurion was caught in a conundrum. He had clearly sensed that an unpredictable, mysterious power was being nurtured in the highest magic tower, but he could not find a way to get in. A 3-dimensional magic formation with strong mental attributes surrounded the entire magic tower. At this moment, Malfurion saw a sign that gave him a headache. It was a green arrow. Chapter 1031. Malfurion's first instinct was to think that it was a trap. The enemy had a ghostly fellow who had seen through everything. But Malfurion's second reaction was to think that it was impossible. It was simple because the green arrowhead was formed from the power of the Emerald Dream. Logically speaking, the Emerald Dream should be a special space unique to Azeroth. Apart from the green dragons, only the druids of the Night Elves had the ability to sneak into the Emerald Dream. In fact, even Malfurion, the first disciple of the demigod Cenarius, was only a half-baked infiltrator. How could the Burning Legion who had just arrived have such a skill? This was not a skill that could be easily passed on to outsiders. The demigod Malorn and the moon goddess Elune had given birth to the demigod Cenarius, whose adoptive mother was the green dragon queen Isra. Relying on this relationship, Cenarius had mastered the technique of sneaking into the Emerald Dream, and thus taught Malfurion and the other first-generation druids how to sneak into the Emerald Dream. Malfurion would never have thought that there would be a monster from 10,000 years in the future who had only entered the Emerald Dream once and seen the dream attack that Isra had used to attack Nethario, the Wing of Death, had actually used the system elf to calculate and figure out how to use dream power. Duque could not easily let his soul wander like Malfurion. After all, entering the Emerald Dream required very strong mental strength. Otherwise, he could do what Malfurion had done and obtain legal entry rights from Isra. Otherwise, he could learn from the King of Nightmares, Savis, and use filthy evil power to forcefully pollute the Emerald Dream before breaking it open and entering it himself. But when it came to the use of various mysterious powers, Malfurion was no match for Duque. using mental strength to condense mental strength that was similar to dream power and spread it between the cracks of reality and the emerald dream. It was extremely easy. If the situation was different, Malfurion would not have dared to casually enter. He saw a small Chinese character on the bottom right corner of the green arrowhead. None. None. Malfurion's soul suddenly trembled. He immediately realized what it meant. That was what the human named Roddick had said. When he and Tyron had asked about the existence that had infiltrated the Burning Legion, Roddick had said vaguely, "For master safety I cannot tell you who he is. But he will leave a mark to distinguish between friend and foe, and that mark is none." Malfurion memorized the strange character. Roddick said, "My master was a legendary figure who could turn the power of darkness into light even though he was cursed by the commander of the Burning Legion. Daoist can choose not to believe him. But if you have no other choice, you might as well consider accepting my master's guidance." At this moment, on one hand, Malfurion was amazed by the formidability of the legendary person who claimed to be nihility. On the other hand, he realized to his surprise that he didn't have many choices. Those eyeball-like abyss devils floating in the void gave him a very bad feeling, as if he would be discovered if he approached. Now he shouldered 300,000 soldiers and the future of the entire Night Elves. Hesitation or being discovered would directly lead to the defeat of this battle. If Ravenkay's army was completely annihilated, it was unknown if he could organize a second large-scale army. After all, Queen Azhara had a righteous status. If the queen put down her pride and even promised her people, how many Night Elves would still have the will to fight? Malfurion didn't dare to imagine. He could only take the gamble. His soul traveled through the half-illusory green dream, wandering in the gap between reality and illusion. Following the arrow, he entered the palace. In the beginning he was more cautious. He spread out his senses in the dream to see if there were enemies in the direction of the Big X. Very soon he almost fell for it. The eyes of the two-eyed devils turned to his sensory tentacles and almost grabbed his spiritual power. This scared Malfurion quite a bit. Even if he was unwilling, he could only follow the instructions and continue walking. Those green dream imprints were very exquisite. Apart from directions, there were also signs such as no passage, the road ahead is narrower, and watch your head. There was even a patrol countdown. Even the eye devil's vision range and patrol route were marked out for Malfurion. Just what position did this nun have in the Burning Legion? This wasn't the kind of information a squad leader or something like that could have. Malfurion was secretly shocked as he continued walking. After many twists and turns, he even had to take a detour of more than 200 meters to avoid an eye devil that was in an excellent position and go through a straight path that was only 10 meters long. Just like that, Malfurion's wandering soul finally arrived in front of a mage tower without any mishaps. He suddenly recognized that it was that bastard Savi's mage tower. Just as he was about to follow the signs and enter the mage tower, Malfurion suddenly froze. He saw 3 huge signs outside the mage tower's gate. Along the way, he had basically distinguished the signs that this nun had set for each level of demon. For example, the yellow sign was for ordinary demons and the silver dragon sign was for rare elites. But here Malfurion saw 3 completely different signs. He recognized one of them. It was the sign that represented Breaking Dawn mages in the Caldari Empire. It obviously represented the Queen's chief advisor, Savi's. The other 2 were demon shadows with the slender appearances of women. They held magic staffs and had 2 black suns on their heads. Inside were white skulls with red eyes. It was a very eye-catching sign. 2 Lord-level great demons? Or are they succubi or warlocks? Malfurion knew that the biggest trouble had come. He had no choice but to brace himself and enter. Light and shadow overlapped and there were psychedelic colors everywhere. Powerful spatial seals and all kinds of magic seals caused the spacious mage tower to be left with only a few narrow paths. If Malfurion wasn't a special existence that couldn't even be considered a ghost in the real world, he wouldn't have been able to reach this place. Malfurion floated in the mage tower, searching for anything he could see that looked like a seal. He had to hurry. With every passing second, more night elves were sacrificed. The only reason was that Malfurion couldn't destroy the seal that blocked the Well of Eternal Life's magic vein faster. Although Malfurion couldn't tell how fast time passed just by looking at the surroundings in the Emerald Dream, He knew that time passed much slower in the dream than in the outside world. He had entered a deep sleep last night before the army set off. The army had probably already started fighting. Chapter 1032. In Savi's Mage Tower, Savis once again heard the teachings of the great god, Sardras. Well done, Savis. You need to be patient and don't make any mistakes. When my most powerful warrior, Arkharon, arrives, the perfect clean world filled with great evil energy that you've been waiting for will soon arrive. Savis was deeply encouraged. Sardras's grand and powerful voice turned into a torrent of excitement, spreading to every inch of his body. At the same time, in the domain of the Emerald Dream, Malfurion did not even dare to breathe. He did not dare to move forward, nor did he dare to retreat, for fear that he would produce strong emotional fluctuations or something else that would attract the attention of that terrifying existence. The time that felt like it was taking forever seemed even longer as he waited in a trance. With great difficulty, the powerful will with the yellow-green light finally faded from the Mage Tower. Then Malfurion heard Savis's laughter. Hoo-hoo, pa, ha, ha. Savis covered half of his face with his right hand to hide his twisted smile. But Malfurion still saw it. He saw the bulging eyeball exposed between the index and middle fingers of his right hand. What kind of eyeball was that? It was bloodshot, filled with savagery and madness, mixed with indifference towards life. What made Malfurion's heart palpitate the most was that the eyeball turned and stared at where Malfurion was. Impossible? Malfurion's soul trembled violently. This was definitely not a coincidence because the gap between reality and the dream was rather tricky. It was the opposite of where a magic lamp was. Most people would not look where the strong light was coming from. If it was a coincidence, then how could Savis's face and eyes turn 120 degrees, and then stare up 60 degrees to see here? Come out! Savis yelled fiercely. I didn't say anything just now because I didn't want the god to know that I'm the kind of idiot who was entrusted with an important task, but didn't even know the enemy had sneaked into my mage tower. At that moment Malfurion deeply regretted it. Damn it, how stupid I was. Malfurion had heard stories about Savis's eyes before. People said that Savis's eyes could see the shadows of shadows, but he dismissed that as a myth. The pair of eyes that allowed Chief Advisor Savis to observe the power of natural witchcraft also allowed him to notice the souls floating around him. Seeing how smug Savis was, Malfurion couldn't help but have the urge to turn around and leave at all costs. Too late. Savis raised his right hand high and clenched it in the air. Malfurion immediately felt that the space around him was trembling violently. It was obviously not a regular spell, nor was it some damn evil energy. It was a power of the same origin as the Emerald Dream. No, that was a nightmare. The black spiritual matter made of infinite nightmares turned into a ball-shaped cage that was at least 30 meters in diameter. It opened a giant mouth that looked very sharp and bit at Malfurion. Not good. Malfurion intended to launch a counterattack immediately, but a strange being reacted even faster than him. It screamed and lunged. Right in front of Malfurion. It was a special existence that lurked in the dream like Malfurion, and it seemed to be a soul. Unlike Malfurion, it was more like a scapegoat that had been hidden in a crack in the dream in advance and thrown out when certain conditions were triggered. If Savis's attack was a trap, then this unknown thing was more like a scapegoat specially used to destroy the trap. Malfurion was tongue-tied as he watched the black shadow being swallowed by Savis's attack. Savis was fooled by this strange being that he had caught. Rather than saying that it was some monster hidden in the dream, it was better to say that it was some kind of spiritual amalgamation with a strong will. It wasn't even a soul. Savis released his spirit and touched the pitch-black spirit. He withdrew it almost immediately because he saw some fragmented fragments. There was once a young arcanist who participated in the great Lord Savis's experiment and met with misfortune. It's actually the amalgamation of some stupid magic apprentice's resentment? Savis couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Have the great god Sardras and Lord Infernal Affairs been giving me too much pressure recently? They're making me nervous. Endless research into arcane spells naturally came with all kinds of costs. Savis turned his wrist and clenched his fist, instantly annihilating the spiritual amalgamation that wasn't even a soul. Savi shook his head and walked out of the room. At this time, if Malfurion still had a body, he would definitely be soaked in cold sweat as if he had just been fished out of the water. Only those who had personally experienced what had just happened knew how thrilling it was. If it wasn't for that perfect and ingenious spiritual amalgamation, it would have been Malfurion who had just been caught. The one who had just been caught would have been him, Malfurion. Never underestimate a mage tower. As the most thorough home field of a powerful wizard, a mage tower didn't just mean that it could greatly increase the power of the wizard who was the master. It also had all kinds of targeted defenses. Once Malfurion was discovered, even the dream space might not be able to protect him. The high concentration of magical elements was enough to cause spatial disorder. If he didn't hide in the deeper layers of the dream world in time, he would probably be forcibly beaten out of the dream space. That would really be the end of him. Malfurion couldn't help but think of the nothing that had helped him. The route had been chosen by this Mr. Mole, so it was hard for Malfurion not to associate this spiritual amalgamation with Mr. Nothing when a life-saving straw had appeared at this time and place. It was a pity that Malfurion didn't understand Chinese. Otherwise, he would definitely associate nothing with the Lord Infernal affairs that Savi's had mentioned. After Savi's left, Malfurion found the target he had been searching for all this time, the seal that controlled the magic branch of the Well of Eternity. It had appeared in the form of a talisman shield. Malfurion could clearly sense that the numerous torrents of magical power that passed through the mage tower all had a small branch that was connected to this talisman shield. Malfurion was ready to move. But at this moment he seemed to hear Tyrant calling out to him in his daze. "Come back, before you are discovered. Come back to us." No. Malfurion firmly refused in his heart. He wanted to complete his mission to save his people, to save his world. The talisman shield had to be removed. Chapter 1033. Malfurion. The voice from the depths of his soul grew clearer. Malfurion knew that it was Tyrant calling him from beside his soulless body. That was the only way her voice could travel such a long distance and echo in his ears. It was Tyrant pleading with him not to be rash. Malfurion focused his mind and ignored Tyrant's call. He floated in a corner and continued to stay still, only spreading out his spirit sense slightly. Savi stood in the room next door, his attention focused on the portal that was emitting dark energy. It was a small portal that had been solidified. From time to time, some demons of average size would enter Azeroth through it. After passing through the portal, they would line up neatly and leave the wizard tower through a pre-designed passage. The rebels are resisting very fiercely. We need a stronger army. Savi seemed to be discussing with a certain lord of the Burning Legion. The current situation was still in Malfurion's favor. If Savi stared at the vortex for a few more minutes, Malfurion believed that he could quickly complete his mission and leave safely. Malfurion floated towards the runic shield, already thinking of how to destroy it. The more intricate the magic circuit, the more fragile it was. As long as he did not break the defensive measures, a few simple changes would be enough. As he advanced, he could no longer hear Tyrant's voice. This either meant that Tyrant allowed him to do this, or the high elemental concentration in the wizard tower had caused the mysterious connection between him and his body to be severed. Either way, he could not turn back now. Malfurion looked through the dream at Savi's, who was behind the walls of the wizard tower filled with magic circuits. He then approached the runic shield with his own strength. He was prepared to completely change the internal composition of the runic shield. This intricate seal had taken the efforts of 8 Breaking Dawn wizards and 10 years of hard work. If it was destroyed, he imagined that even with Queen Azhara's manpower, it would take at least several months for it to be repaired. If it was done skillfully and smoothly, the runic shield's defensive formation would not react for a short period of time until the runic shield completely collapsed and the branch vein of the Well of Eternity started flowing again. At that time, he had already completed the destruction and left cleanly. In the dream world, Malfurion couldn't directly affect the real world. After confirming that nobody was paying attention to him, Malfurion cast a spell to bring his soul closer to the material world. At this moment he was no different from the wandering souls that wandered the world after death. Malfurion began his spell. What he was summoning now was the power of the world, the power of nature. He used this power to reassemble the talisman. This new form would negate the purpose of the talisman and cause it to disappear. The talisman shield trembled. He was about to succeed. Success was close at hand. Malfurion, who was still young, could barely hold back the ecstasy in his heart. He was far from the steady druid 10,000 years later. For the night elves, Malfurion was still very young at this moment. I'm going to be the hero who saved Cadores. He had forgotten what Cenarius had taught him. The closer he was to success, the more careful he had to be. He didn't even notice the two voluptuous, evil-looking female bodies that appeared in the void behind his soul. There's a rat. A magical rat. It sounded like two long and slow sentences, but they were compressed into the shortest syllable at the same time and pierced into Malfurion's soul directly, allowing him to hear every note of the two sentences clearly and even the mockery in them. Oh no. Malfurion suddenly realized that the close distance had become the farthest distance. Darkness and fire. Two powerful forces burst out of thin air and forcibly dispelled his force of nature. All his efforts to influence the charm shield were in vain. More terrifyingly, Malfurion sensed that the space around him was becoming heavy. If he could not return to the domain of the Emerald Dream in the next second, his soul would be confined in the narrow space. That's right. Every great demon was an expert at playing with souls. Malfurion couldn't imagine what would happen to his soul if it fell into the hands of the great demons. Was he going to fail completely? Malfurion didn't even dare to imagine how Savis and the Burning Legion would fortify the defenses here after this failure. The Emerald Dream was not invincible. He couldn't use it to sneak in again. After the Night Elves' resistance was slaughtered, it was meaningless to discuss whether the other Night Elves could regain the power of the Well of Eternity. Was he really going to fail completely? Malfurion's entire soul felt like it was frozen due to extreme fear. At the very end, Malfurion suddenly sensed something. It was a seed. Ordinary seeds couldn't attract his attention, but this was the seed of the Tree of Life. He would never mistake it for someone else. Even though the seed felt completely dead and its life force had been completely devoured by the power of darkness, the Tree of Life got its name because of its endless life force. As long as there was an external injection of life force, and as long as the seed was preserved, it could be reborn. Malfurion brazenly activated Wild Growth. Originally, this was just a druid's recovery spell. But when it was used on the seed of the Tree of Life, it had another effect. Caught off guard. When a seed germinated, grew and turned into a towering tree in 1/100th of a second, anyone would be dumbfounded. The Tree of Life that had suddenly emerged after receiving all the magic from a powerful druid immediately turned into a human form according to Malfurion's will. It punched out at the two female demons who looked like they were not to be trifled with. This bought Malfurion the most precious time, allowing him to concentrate the last of his natural power on the rune shield. However, when he was about to destroy the rune shield, a sudden fear descended upon him. Malfurion's soul began to tremble uncontrollably. You won't touch this rune shield. A terrifying voice appeared in his heart. You don't want to do this. You just want to serve me, worship me. Chapter 1034. The voice was so loud that it felt as if he was surrounded by giant bells that were as tall as two people. Just the sound waves alone were enough to shatter his soul. He could not resist it at all. The horrifying sound waves easily crashed into Malfurion's spiritual world. Even his soul felt numb. Malfurion tried his best not to succumb to the voice. Roddick and the others had already told him what kind of misfortune would befall everyone if he were to enter Azeroth. He used to think that these mysterious visitors were exaggerating the terror of Sardras, the leader of the Burning Legion. Only after experiencing it for himself would he understand that the sins released by the hundreds of thousands of demons that had entered this world paled in comparison, not even a 10,000th of what Sardras was capable of. No, I won't serve you, Sardras. In the past, the gentle druid was almost roaring these words in his spiritual world. Sardras was too far away from this world. Although he was terrifying, his influence was limited. The druid was a powerhouse in the spiritual realm. With his strong willpower and long training in the Emerald Dream, Malfurion finally broke free from the whirlpool of thoughts. Malfurion could feel the terrifying anger that came from those eyes after crossing the endless void. At the same time, he understood that the evil will from the distorted void could not affect him in any way other than attacking his spiritual world. Malfurion tried his best to focus and ignore Sardra's existence. He was only thinking about what failure would mean for the night elves in the entire world. Giving up on chanting the incantation, Malfurion's soul roared angrily. That was the trembling of nature. It was a roar against the power of darkness after contacting the wrath of nature. Stop him! Savis, who had appeared at the door, shouted. In fact, Savis had rushed back as soon as he sensed that something was wrong. Be it him or the Eridar Gemini, they were both a step too slow. The Tree of Life seed had consumed almost all of Malfurion's magic power. However, no one had expected that the mini Tree of Life would nourish Malfurion at the last moment after it finished growing. A wisp of inconspicuous green light did not trigger the protective shield and directly filled the inside of the spell shield. The next moment, almost every being in Azhara felt a strong tremor from the Well of Eternity. Boom! It was a loud roar that sounded like a dam breaking. The dark water of the Well of Eternity, which had calmed down for a long time, boiled again. Near the walls of the well, in 8 directions, east, west, south, north and southeast, suddenly appeared 8 large whirlpools that could easily swallow a house. At this moment, Best Actor Duque, who was presiding over the opening ceremony of the portal in the Mage Tower in the center of Azhara's Forbidden Palace, had a perfectly timed expression of shock. Those idiots! Who was he referring to as an idiot? Whoever was responsible for guarding the talisman shield was a dereliction of duty and a fool. Recently, Duque had been maintaining his shadow form. Now he directly turned into a thick cloud of black smoke and rushed out at high speed. This was one of the Shadow Priest's signature skills, Dissipate. Duque's Dissipate was fundamentally different from the Dissipate of ordinary priests. When he infused his entire body with the power of shadow, not only could he turn himself into pure shadow matter and remove all shackles on him, but he also had the effect of accelerating his charge. Perhaps this was the additional benefit of becoming a great Void Lord. His vision was black and white, but with the help of the system elf, Duque could still see his surroundings clearly. Door after door and scenery after scenery flashed past him at high speed. He could not hear the sound of the wind, nor did he have any sense of taste or smell. The only thing that fell into Duque's eyes was Malfurion, who was highlighted by the system. At this moment, Malfurion was in a huge trouble. If it was him in the original history, he would only encounter Savis this time. According to the script, he could totally escape without any danger. Unfortunately, because he was kicked into the twisting nether by an irresponsible space dragon king, he ended up with 2 demon lords guarding the talisman shield. At this moment, Malfurion was in a desperate situation. The twins also knew that things were not looking good. Jaden was generous to his subordinates, but the prerequisite was that they could complete the mission he gave them. On the other hand, if they could not complete the mission, especially a mission that did not seem particularly difficult, that would really be laughable. Guarding the talisman shield, ensuring that the Well of Eternity's mana supplied to the giant portal, and thus ensuring that Archimonde and even Sargeras would descend. Everything was linked. No matter what the reason was messing up. The twins did not dare to imagine what kind of punishment they would receive. The only thing they could do now was to quickly catch the guy who caused the destruction before Jaden's thunderous rage descended. At least this could make up for their mistakes. Otherwise, their positions as lords would come to an end. The power struggle within the Burning Legion was far more terrifying than outsiders could imagine. They were also not irreplaceable. For example, the Sylvanas had the ability to kick them out of their positions. What race was the Sylvanas? Perhaps no one reacted to this name, but the most famous representative of the Sylvanas was Mother Shiraz, who guarded the Black Temple in the future and tortured countless players. That's right. She was ambitious and devoted to ruling over all the female demons in the Burning Legion. She had 6 arms. Thinking about this, the Erida Geminis also went crazy. Envelop him, Shadow. Saloras waved her hand. Devour him, Flames. Elises shouted. With the twins and Savi's magical black eyes, even if Malfurion was more ghostly than a ghost, he would not be able to get away with it. The Emerald Dream, as the name suggested, was a dream. Dreaming required one to relax mentally and enter the magical state of dreaming. Malfurion, who was not very familiar with the technique, needed time to re-enter the Emerald Dream. In order to destroy the talisman shield, his soul completely entered the real world. Facing the fierce attacks of the two demon lords, he instinctively raised his hand, seeking help from the air and wind. The power of nature and the power of shadows and flames collided in mid-air, causing a loud explosion. Fortunately, they were inside the Mage Tower. Since the Mage Tower could not detect Malfurion, it automatically activated the magic shield and became a useless teammate. That was how Malfurion escaped. Chapter 1035. But he would not be so lucky the next time. Savis charged at Malfurion. The artificial eye emitted black energy and hit Malfurion's soul. The dark power was so violent that Malfurion could not imagine what would have happened if he had been hit by the joint attack of two demon lords that were even more powerful than this one. Malfurion was almost in a panic. Basically, he dared to rush forward as long as there was no barrier of high-density elements in the direction he came from. He rushed through 3 thick walls in a single breath and rushed straight out of the Mage Tower. The Eridar twins had gone all out. Their surging magic power condensed into all kinds of spells and chased after Malfurion crazily. The power of shadow and flame was initially blocked by the barrier of the Mage Tower. Perhaps the violent magic power broke through the barrier. Or perhaps Savis realized that if he didn't close the barrier he would only be harming himself and the Gemini. In the next moment, the twins' combined attack easily blew up 3 layers of walls and even a small teleportation portal that they passed by, shooting straight at Malfurion, who was outside of the Mage Tower. Despair. Malfurion was really in despair. His despair even crossed the void and was directly reflected in the body placed in Fort Raven. Looking at Malfurion, who was twitching and pale, and then stained with a trace of darkness, how could Tyron not know that Malfurion's soul was being attacked by dark energy? Tyron's face paled as she screamed, "No!" Malfurion. In the void, Malfurion, who had exhausted his magic power and could no longer hide, knew that he was done for. No matter how he dodged, he could not avoid the 2 magic attacks that were still under the control of the opponent's will. In the next instant he would be struck and then his soul would scatter, completely vanishing from this world. Farewell, Tyrant. In the darkest despair, Malfurion closed his eyes and waited for the final moment to come. Boom. The massive shadow and flame energy engulfed the entire plaza outside the Mage Tower, even hitting many of the demon soldiers who had just left the Mage Tower. The 3-meter-tall demon guards swayed like leaves in a storm. The aftermath of the berserk mana shattered the walls of the Forbidden Palace in the distance, and 2 shadow arrows struck down the night elf wizards who were standing guard at the entrance. This caused a huge commotion. Screams and screams could be heard everywhere. There were even moon guards shouting, "The traitors have reached the city." After closing his eyes, Malfurion's chest was fluctuating on his translucent soul, as if he were breathing irregularly. In fact, it was just a subconscious movement. As a spirit he did not need to breathe. However, the will that still existed told him that he had not been completely destroyed by that terrifying joint attack. Opening his eyes, Malfurion suddenly found himself in an even worse situation. No, Malfurion was truly desperate this time, because he suddenly found that his soul was grasped by a black hand. He was taken prisoner. A few seconds later, the Erida twins and Savis arrived at the same time. Logically speaking, it was a good thing that this ghostly destroyer had been caught. Unfortunately, neither Savis nor the twins were happy at all. Because the one who had caught the despicable infiltrator was the person they wanted to see the most, the mysterious and powerful Great Lord of the Spies. Dark energy extended from the palm of Duque, who had returned to his human form, and turned into a huge black hand that firmly grasped Malfurion's soul. There was a frosty expression on Duque's well-defined dark face as if he was saying, "Look at what you've done." If Duque had reprimanded the 3 of them right from the start, they might have felt better, but Duque did not say a word. This silent pressure caused them to tremble with fear. The clear sky suddenly turned as dark as ink. The will of the demon king Sargeras had descended once more. A translucent image that was even larger than the entire 7-story Mage Tower appeared in front of all the surrounding demons and elves. It was obvious that Sargeras was furious. Otherwise he would not have used such a huge amount of mana to project his image. "Kill Jaden." Look at what the idiots under you have done. With that, Sardra's figure disappeared on the spot. Disappearing did not mean that this matter was over. On the contrary, this was just the beginning. Because CO Sardra's words had set the tone for this matter. As expected, the moment CO Sardra's will left Kill Jaden arrived. His furious voice shook the Eridar twins and Savis so much that they vomited blood. This was not an adjective. They really vomited blood. The punishment from their souls made the twins of Erida spit out a mouthful of blood that was filled with magic power. It was hard to tell what color it was. Trash. All of you are trash. The Void Fleet has been assembled. Archimonde is ready to descend and all the schedules are fixed. Zeras. Please. With the two of you watching, I actually let a low-level creature destroy the shield of the Well of Eternity. What use do I have for you two trash? Jaden was a very patient great demon. He could spend hundreds of years to solve a problem that violence could not solve. On the other hand, he was also a perfectionist. He could tolerate accidents, but he definitely could not tolerate his subordinates making such a low-level mistake. As he roared, the punishment from their souls increased. The twins of Erida, who were originally full of feminine charm, were rolling on the ground in pain as he roared. Every inch of their skin looked as if it had been cut by a small knife, and it opened up on its own. On their smooth hands and feet, there were only bloody lumps of flesh. There were no screams because their voices had been sealed. Their sexy lips were opened to the extreme, and only a silent cry was left. Savis, who was beside them, knelt on the ground, trembling. This terrifying torture lasted for a full 30 minutes. Every time the twins' souls or bodies were about to collapse, a few Erida dark acolytes who were summoned would cast dark healing on the twins to heal the wounds on their bodies. Then it would be the next round of torture. Even if you suffer in pain for tens of thousands of years, you will not be able to make up for your sins. Jaden was still angry. At this time, Du, who knew that Malfurion would come to cause trouble in history, suggested to let the twins guard the shield and cause the twins to bleed. He stood up without a change in expression. Respected Lord Jaden, actually, it might not be impossible to catch up to the army's plan. Chapter 1036. In the air, Jaden's projection, which was only the size of a human, turned around. He had no pupils, only a pair of eyes that were spewing flames. Yet, everyone could tell that Jaden was interested. Not just him, even the Eridar Gemini, who were curled up on the ground, were suddenly attracted by a sense of disbelief. Even though they were extremely weak, dizzy, and spiritually tired, the Gemini struggled to raise their heads and listen to the conversation between Duque and Jaden. Infernal affairs. Do you know what you're saying? This has nothing to do with you. I know. But the Eridar Gemini's failure is Lord Jaden's failure, which is also my failure. I believe that I have the ability to make up for all of this, Duke said in a seemingly humble manner. Jaden's projection narrowed his eyes. What do you need? Power. The Burning Legion has absolute power in Azhara City. This includes interrogating the captives, building the teleportation portal, setting up the new defense system, and the power to dispatch all the lords of the demons. Duque said calmly. In exchange, I'm willing to use my soul as a bet to build a teleportation portal that can accommodate Lord Archimonde's arrival within 7 days. Oh. If Jaden had only been angry before, he was now filled with boundless joy. You can rebuild that complicated rune shield and speed up the construction of the teleportation portal? That thing isn't difficult. It'll take 2 days at most. Including debugging and gathering the mana of the Well of Eternity, it'll take a total of 4 days. And I said before that I only need 3 days to build the teleportation portal. In other words, if you leave everything to me, 7 days. No more, no less. Duque's words were resolute, powerful, and filled with absolute confidence. Even Jaden couldn't help but be moved by this boldness. Jaden definitely wasn't having a good time. If planet Azeroth was an unimportant low-level planet, it didn't matter if the attack failed. He could just send another legion over later. Anything that involved the creation titans of the Pantheon was definitely not simple. In the entire Burning Legion, only he, Archimonde, and Sardras knew how important Azeroth was. Now that the Eridar Gemini had caused trouble, he couldn't absolve himself from the blame. Archimonde, who had always been at odds with him, wouldn't be nice to him and he wouldn't be able to withstand Sargera's anger. Once the plan was delayed, even if the Burning Legion succeeded, Archimonde would still be above him. Although he and Archimonde were both ministers, they had always been competitors as the three magnates of Eridar. Zhou Xian was definitely not happy of him acknowledging a grandson of Azeroth. The current situation forced kills and kills of King of King. As long as you can complete the construction of the teleportation gate on time, not only will I double the reward I promised you and promote you to a High Lord, but I will also grant you 3 special requests that are worthy of this contribution. As long as you can complete the construction of the portal on time, not only will I double the reward that I promised you and promote you to a high-rank lord, I can also grant you 3 special requests that are worthy of this contribution. Of course, I will never tolerate those who mess up the plan, even if they are old subordinates that have followed me for many years. I promise to complete the mission. Duque promised solemnly. At this moment, Duque's heart was filled with ecstasy. He was so happy that his face was practically covered with a smile. This time his happiness wasn't fake. He was really over the moon. Burning Legion. Hast thou at last put thy neck upon my noose? The ill-intentioned Dew sneered. In Zhou Xian's eyes, Duque's agitated and cold smile had another meaning: ambition. Zhou Xian smiled too. Ambition was definitely a good thing for a Void Lord. It wasn't that you didn't have ambition, it was that your strength couldn't match up to your ambition. As of a superior, the last thing he was afraid of was a power struggle between his subordinates. The Burning Legion was an army of destruction made up of the cruelest and most violent races in the universe. It wasn't a charity. If you didn't have some means and strength, you deserved to be swallowed whole. Zhou Xian glanced coldly at the kneeling Gemini and Savis. He didn't care about Savis and directly punished the Gemini's soul. After torturing the 2 pitiful creatures to death, he said to Duque, "Infernal affairs, I'll leave the Gemini to you. If you think they're still useful, let them redeem themselves. If they're useless, you can deal with them yourself." After saying that, Duque noticed an exquisite bracelet flying out from another portal not far away. As soon as he received it, Duque understood what it was. This thing was like the band-tightening spell that Tang Xing used to control Sun Wukong. With just a thought, he could activate the spell formation in the bracelet. By torturing the Gemini's soul, he could make the Eridar Gemini regret being born into this world. Of course, it wasn't impossible to kill the Gemini. However, doing so would definitely be disadvantageous to Duque. It was very simple. Did Duque have horns on his head? Did he have 3 whiskers on his chin that looked like ding-ding? Did he have a tail? Did he have hooves? *CK, you're in the Burning Legion and you're executing the elites of the Eridar tribe. What's the meaning of this? Before opening the portal, Duque could do anything to the Eridar Gemini, but he couldn't kill them. Once they were killed, Zhou Xian would definitely focus all his attention on Duque. That wouldn't be fun. Understood. Duque lowered his head deeply. Zhou Xian's consciousness dissipated. The surrounding air returned to its usual calmness. If it wasn't for the traces of destruction left behind by the shadows and flames, no one would have thought that an intense chase had just happened here. Duque glanced at Malfurion's soul, which was still in his dark power palm, and said coldly, "Be quiet, despicable night elves. Otherwise I'll cut your soul into pieces and scatter your soul fragments to every filthy place in the world. Finally, I'll give your soul core to the Burning Legion Lord and let him deal with you according to his whims." Malfurion was terrified and in despair. Enveloped by Duque's dark power, he couldn't connect to the Emerald Dream no matter how hard he tried. Duque turned around and faced Savis. "Take me to see the talisman shield." "Yes." Savis lowered his noble head deeply. On the other side, due to the recovery of the mana supply from the Well of Eternity, the Night Elves who had been in an extremely weak position just now launched a counterattack. Chapter 1037. Just a moment ago, the Night Elves were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, trembling in front of the endless demon army. Lord Ravenkay's face was ashen. He had overestimated the combat power of the elves after losing their magic and underestimated the power of the Burning Legion. On any battlefield, one of the two was enough to be fatal, not to mention both. If they were not completely wiped out, then they were really lucky. In just an hour of battle, more than 8 elven nobles of the rank of Earl and above had died in battle, and there were countless lesser nobles below them. This included the leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius. Latuzius was a very powerful elf. He practiced both magic and martial arts, and his abilities could be said to be invincible among the elves. His opponent was an Apocalypse Guard Lord who was more than 5 meters tall and had a tan body. In terms of pure martial arts, Latuzius was even slightly superior to the Demon Lord. The problem was his physique. No matter how strong Latuzius was, he was still a night elf. After evolving from trolls to night elves, the elves obtained the powerful spellcasting ability that they dreamed of, but in exchange they lost the insane regenerative ability of the trolls. The Apocalypse Lord could take dozens of attacks that would be fatal to mortals, but unfortunately the night elves could only take one. Therefore, powerful demons often had more opportunities to make mistakes than elves. Latuzius made a fatal mistake. In the beginning he had been paying attention and told himself not to use magic. When the battle entered the most intense stage, he forgot about this and subconsciously looked for an opening and chanted a spell. When the spell had no effect, he realized that without the magic support of the Well of Eternity, he could not instantly cast such a powerful spell. This cost him his life. The backlash from the magic power circuit slowed his movements by a beat. As a result, the Demon Lord opposite him seized the opportunity and used his green crescent-like fist blades to split Latuzius into two. The death of the Moon Guard Lord was a huge blow to the morale of the Moon Guards who had defected to Lord Ravenkaze. Fortunately, Illidan's bravery made up for all this. Holding a scimitar that the elves rarely used, Illidan rushed over with incredible speed. He moved so fast that the naked eye couldn't follow him, circling around the Apocalypse Lord like a butterfly, slashing at it non-stop. If Illidan was just a fly, he might have been slapped to death like Latuzius. However, Illidan was able to sneak into the Moon Guards because of his dual cultivation. Mana Ignition. This was a skill that would cause all mages a headache. It was known as the enemy of mages. Not only did he burn the Doom Lord's mana, Illidan also paid attention to destroying the magic nodes between the Doom Lord's magic circuits. Destroying the connection between multiple magic circuits would result in the imbalance of the opponent's magic power, and the damage would be multiplied. Finally, after a few rounds, Illidan yelled out, "Die, demon." He beheaded the low-level Doomsday Lord's head as a trophy of war. He also took the enemy's fist blades, which were flickering with a strange yellow-green light. "Is that Azino's? From now on you will be called the Warblade of Azzinoth." Illidan held the 2 incomplete Warblades of Azzinoth in one hand and raised the hideous head of the Apocalypse Lord Azzinoth high up in the air. He shouted, "The enemy's Lord Azzinoth has been killed by me." Illidan's storm rage. Oh. The surrounding night elves' morale was instantly boosted. The more disadvantaged they were, the more they needed a hero. Illidan could have become a hero on this battlefield, even if he lost this battle. However, just as Illidan was filled with joy and thought that he would be favored by Tyrande when he returned, something unexpected happened. It was a good thing for all the elves. It was a bad thing for Illidan. Because along with an invisible and untouchable wave that suddenly swept through the entire place, the Heavenly Dragon King's body suddenly trembled. Every elf's face was filled with uncontrollable ecstasy. The demon, who was showing his cruel and bloodthirsty face, could not understand why these elves, who had almost given up and were purely fighting for their lives, suddenly became so excited. Soon they understood. More than half of the elves' hands lit up with magic. That's right. The Well of Eternity's magic supply to the branch vein had been restored. On the Kalimdor continent, where the Well of Eternity's magic branch vein was spread over half of the continent, magic was the true main melody. This was also the biggest reason why Kadoriai could dominate half of the continent and beat the trolls and other races like dogs. The next moment, the entire atmosphere was shaken by the pouring of all kinds of magic. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, countless rays of magic light streaked across the sky like a meteor shower, smashing into the heads of the Burning Legion's demons. Even if there were many Cerberus in the Burning Legion, so what? Countless icicles fell from the sky. When the elemental materialization turned into physical attacks, that was when the Cerberus fell. Illidan was supposed to be the only star on this battlefield, but now there was Ronan. That's right. Ronan actually leveled up. On this chaotic battlefield. As a strong-willed mage, Ronan never lacked talent or patience but opportunity. Compared to Chidori, who was used to borrowing external forces, he always insisted on using his own magic to fight. This was decided by the fact that human mages in later generations did not have a good source of magic. Therefore he specialized in arcane magic, and as a basic magic circuit he was stronger than any other mage of the same age. In order to fight on the battlefield, Ronan kept clearing out all the magic in his body. Relying on the magic recovery from his exquisite equipment, he used up all his magic as soon as it recovered. Under such extreme pressure he had unintentionally or unintentionally strengthened his control over magic. Because of the lack of magic he needed to use magic more efficiently. Because magic recovery was not easy, he pursued the most cost-effective ratio between magic, and used the most suitable magic on the enemy that could affect the overall situation the most. Ronan, who was already on the verge of leveling up, waited with the Night Elves for the Well of Eternity's magic to arrive. Just by himself he transferred away the magic that could supply 100,000 Earth mages. In the air behind Ronan, thousands of magic circles suddenly lit up with a bright purple and blue light. The brilliance of his magic overshadowed the entire Ravenkay's mage team. If the mage team's magic rain was a gentle breeze and drizzle, then the power of Ronan's move was the doomsday storm that could destroy the entire world. Arcane Missile, Storm. Chapter 1038. Every spell formation appeared out of thin air, pouring out mana to strike the enemy before disappearing. It was more dazzling than fireworks, more solemn than death. Compared to the demon army that only brought slaughter and destruction, Ronan's attacks were more like the art of war. At some point the Ravenkay's mages were stunned and stopped what they were doing. Even though they had recovered their mana to the maximum, the combined damage of their entire team of 4 mages could not even compare to a tenth of Ronan's. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The seemingly endless arcane missiles whistled through the air, forming a continuous super long sound. The light released when the arcane elements hit the demons drew out a gigantic magic scroll. Using magic as the paint and death as the embellishment, the huge Burning Legion vanguard completely became the background in front of Ronan, a newly advanced Breaking Dawn mage. Endless explosions rang out, blowing up thousands of pieces of evil demons' limbs of all sizes. Ronan used his arcane missile storm to plow the battlefield from left to right, front to back, over and over again. Every arcane missile had the power of a 7-pound cannon. It was like the sky was falling. It was like the earth was turning upside down. Every night elf became a witness to this miracle with their eyes wide open and their tongues tied. It wasn't that every Breaking Dawn great wizard with unlimited mana was as terrifying as they were. It was precisely because Ronan came from the magical holy land of humans, the Dalajan, that he developed the habit of accurately calculating the mana required for each arcane missile. It was also because he learned from Duque, who inherited the name of the Hundred-Handed Reaper, that he could master the super multicasting technique that no one else in history had ever mastered. Moreover, he had been training his skills day after day, year after year, and was equipped with magnificent equipment that transcended countless eras. On top of that, the elves had given him the password to the magical interface of the Well of Eternity. That was why he was able to launch such a crazy attack in such destructive power that could never be replicated. He almost single-handedly wiped out the entire Burning Legion vanguard. Ronan, a little wizard of humble birth, had finally reached the peak of his life on the most magnificent stage 10,000 years ago. Illidan's achievement of killing the enemy's leader was like the light of a firefly against the light of the sun in front of Ronan's achievement of destroying an entire army. Originally, Illidan would have been jealous, but with the arrival of a piece of news, all the victories and jealousy became dull. His brother Malfurion's Stormridge's soul had been lost, and he had fallen into a state of absent-mindedness. Big brother. Illidan rode on the Hippogriphon and rushed back to Fort Raven as fast as he could. When he rushed into the room where his brother's body was placed, he saw Tyrande with tears streaming down her face and a group of druids who were as silent as death. What happened to my big brother? Who can tell me what happened to him? Was he killed? Or will he never wake up again? Illidan shook every elf he came across like a madman, eager to get an accurate answer from any of their mouths. Tyron's beautiful face was full of tears and her mouth was trembling. Finally she said, "I don't know. The druids can only confirm that Malfurion's soul is not in the Emerald Dream." "What else?" "That's all. Are you trying to tell me that my great brother, who became a hero and saved the Night Elf army, died in a place where I can't see him?" Illidan's determined face kept twitching and his pair of amber eyes, which made his compatriots curious, flashed with an incomparably conflicted light. Yes. At this point in time, Illidan had not lost his eyes yet. He was still the moon guardian that his compatriots looked up to, and the strongest among the elves. When the leader of the moon guardians, Latuzius, died, Illidan, who had killed the Doomsday Lord named Azeroth, became the new leader of the moon guardians. It was almost certain that Illidan would become the new leader of the moon guardians. In the eyes of his compatriots, Illidan was already a hero. The problem was that at this moment Malfurion, who had always been disliked by his compatriots, had suddenly sacrificed himself in order to enter Azhara with his soul and open up a path of survival for his compatriots. Malfurion suddenly had all the elements of a tragic hero. Perhaps the one who survived would be the final winner. But in the process of competing with his brother for Tyrant, Illidan, who was extremely proud of himself, knew that he did not want this result. As victory. No. We don't know. Tyrant cried, almost choking on her sobs. He was also very confused. As childhood friends and a strong person who grew up together, she had never thought about the scene of Malfurion or Illidan dying. The kind Tyrant did not even want to hurt either of them, so how could she think about such a terrible thing? Farewell, this seemingly distant word was so close. When it really came, Tyrant was at a loss. No, Sir Malfurion is probably not dead. His soul is probably captured. As the voice spoke, the elves turned around and saw the human mage hero who had just shown off on the battlefield standing at the door. If this human called Roddick was a night elf, he would have been revered as a god just because of this battle. But now everyone was a little conflicted when they saw him. What the 300,000-strong army couldn't do, Roddick had done alone. While everyone was stunned, only Illidan remained clear-headed. "Human, what do you think happened to Malfurion?" "You're saying that Malfurion used the Emerald Dream as a cover to destroy Azhara's shield that blocked the branch of magic power? Then he obviously succeeded. But he should have been taken captive." "No," Tyrant screamed and covered her face with her hands. Clear tears still flowed out from between her tightly closed fingers. She did not dare to imagine what would happen to Malfurion after his soul was captured by the demons. Ronan walked over and carefully examined Malfurion's body. He was still breathing evenly as if he was just sleeping. No torture. His soul was not corrupted by the power of darkness. We should be glad that His Excellency Malfurion was simply a captive, or his soul was trapped. Regardless of whether his soul was captured or trapped, this was not a good thing for Tyrant and Illidan. Almost as soon as this conclusion came out, they began to despair and prepared themselves to lose Malfurion forever. Chapter 1039. In fact, there was something that Ronan did not say. This did not seem like something a Lord of the Burning Legion would do. As someone who had participated in the First and Second Dark Portal Wars, Ronan knew very well how dark the souls of warlocks were. As long as a soul was contaminated by darkness, the result would definitely be reflected on its body. The demons of the Burning Legion could not change their nature to kill and destroy. Malfurion dismantled the seal and delayed the opening of the portal of the Burning Legion. Considering the nature of the demons, how could they not torture Malfurion's soul? The biggest possibility was that his master, who had successfully infiltrated the higher-ups of the Burning Legion, had personally captured Malfurion's soul. Perhaps this was a very bad guess. He felt that his master, Duque, was intentionally or unintentionally using Malfurion's soul to do something. Ronan could not help but ask himself, was it really that easy to infiltrate a terrifying intergalactic demon organization like the Burning Legion? If his master had really fallen and was only using him and his companions who had traveled 10,000 years ago, then, on the other hand, his master had turned the rotten into the miraculous. The miraculous scene of his master forcefully transforming the power of darkness into holy light after being afflicted by Archeron's shadow curse was deeply imprinted in Luo Ning's mind. Duque was the one who had taught him and created the Great Alliance. Ronan always had the utmost respect for Duque. Two completely different thoughts attacked Ronan's rationality. Both sides were reasonable and both sides were possible. This kind of conflict almost drove Ronan crazy. Soon Ronan no longer had the luxury to think about these things. News came that Lord Ravencase was preparing to launch an all-out attack on Azhara City. While the Elven lords were enthusiastically discussing the route and plan of attack, only Ronan kept his cool. Wait. The Burning Legion is not as weak as you think. You should first ally with the Taurens and Dragons and then... Ronan shouted until his voice was hoarse, but none of the higher-ups were willing to listen to him. Even Tyrande and Illidan, who were originally friendly to the Transmigrators, became anxious because of the loss of Malfurion's soul. They wanted to kill their way into Azhara and save Malfurion. Illidan's eyes were even sharper. Contact the unreliable Taurens? Stop joking. Tyrande shook her head as well. Since the birth of Caldorii, the dragon race has always been detached from the world. I don't think they will participate in the war. Ravencase's reason sounded even more convincing. His Excellency Malfurion Stormwind has opened the way for us with his sacrifice. Are we going to give up this great opportunity to attack for an impossible alliance? The talisman shield that could seal the various magic veins had been destroyed, but nobody knew to what extent it had been damaged or how long it would take for the enemy to repair it. The worst-case scenario is that the enemy will be able to repair the shield in a month. Therefore we must seize this opportunity to attack. Several high-tier elven wizards also expressed their reasonable opinions, explaining the complexity and difficulty of repairing the rune shield, but also emphasizing that it was not irreparable. Judging from this theory, it was definitely the best strategy to seize the opportunity to attack while the army could still use the power of the Well of Eternity. Otherwise they would have to wait until Azhara City sealed the mana vein again. Otherwise, when Azhara City sealed the magic veins again, the battle power of the army would be reduced by at least 70%. For the Caldorii nobles, high elves, who were participating in the army, this was definitely disadvantageous, whether it was against the enemy or to increase the weight of their words in the so-called alliance. Ronan was so anxious that he was about to go crazy. No matter how hard he tried to persuade them, his throat was almost on fire, but he still could not extinguish the rash thoughts of these zealous elves. However, he still had one thought that he did not dare to say out loud. If it was Duque who wanted to repair the talisman shield, it would not even take a month. Only Ronan, as his disciple, had the deepest understanding of how monstrous his master was. One has to know that Luo Ning hadn't even learned a tenth of Duke's 100 hands technique. Controlling 12 hands of magic at different targets at the same time was already Ronan's limit, let alone the 100 hands. Ronan firmly believed that under the same conditions as his master, Duque's magic power and destructive power would definitely be 10 times, or even 100 times greater. Sigh. Ronan let out a long sigh as he watched the Night Elven army step into the abyss of death with despair. Standing on a makeshift platform, the venerable Ravencase used a sound amplification spell to spread his voice far and wide. The despicable demons are entrenched in our great capital of Caldorii. These evil beings have captured our most beloved queen, and forced the beautiful Queen Azhara to kneel before the demon god. My fellow Caldorii, can you allow such cruelty to happen? No. 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 Hundreds of thousands of elves shouted in unison. On the vast grassland, neatly arranged square formations were densely packed. After today's battle, the victory had inspired the other lords and elves. Countless elves heard the news and came to join the army. In just 2 days, the army had swelled to a terrifying number of 500,000. The lords who had just died had to be compensated with double the amount. It was the same for the military strength. Every elf's eyes were red, and they could not wait to charge into the city of Azhara and wipe out the demons. Ravencase raised his clenched fist high and slammed it down on the podium with a loud bang. This loud bang was also transmitted to the entire army through a sound amplification spell. My compatriots, then what are we waiting for? For our beautiful Caldorii Empire. For Her Majesty the Queen. To Azhara, attack. 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 The violent momentum that seemed to be able to overturn the entire world infected every night elf. They raised the weapons in their hands and shouted to vent the excitement in their hearts. The intelligence of the army was quickly sent to Azhara's forbidden palace in the form of a secret letter. Ironically, Ravenkay's act of saving the queen did not gain the praise of the supreme queen in his heart, but instead incurred the wrath of the queen. "You ungrateful old dog, how dare you obstruct the coming of my husband, and the birth of the powerful Darksider world." The queen's beautiful brows were scrunched together, and her exquisite face was filled with irrepressible anger. Suddenly the queen shouted, "Varosan!" Chapter 1040. A burly figure emerged from the crowd. Varosan, the captain of her guards, knelt on one knee and placed a fist on his chest. "I am the Supreme Empress. My dear captain, you know what to do when it comes to traitors like Ravenkays who stand in the way of my great cause." "I know," Varosan replied firmly, and his figure quickly disappeared in front of the queen. Looking at the green demonic smoke rolling like clouds outside the balcony, the queen's face showed a rare cold expression. "If the great high elves do nothing but open the door and watch my husband arrive, wouldn't that make me, the queen, useless?" At the same time in the city of Azhara, a dozen lords gathered. Especially the lords of the abyss led by Manaroth. Their faces were filled with indignation and resentment. But no matter how indignant they were, they could only keep it to themselves, because the one standing on the balcony of the Mage Tower was the lord of the infernal underworld, personally appointed by Kil Jaden to be in charge of all matters in the Burning Legion before the door was opened. If not for the defeat 2 days ago, perhaps Manaroth could still look for Archimonde and use his connections to fight against the commander of the infernal underworld. But failure was unforgivable. Especially when an entire vanguard of the Burning Legion was completely wiped out, and even Lord Azeroth, who was in charge of the vanguard, was killed. This was a humiliating failure that the Burning Legion had not experienced for thousands of years. Even Manaroth, the temporary military chief, was to be held accountable, but the infernal underworld, who had contributed to the opening of the door, took the opportunity to climb up. Although the lords knew that the commander of the infernal underworld was temporary, it was still very displeasing. Duque stood on the balcony, and his sharp Eridar voice was transmitted to the ears of every lord through the amplification magic. "Failure. Why is there a failure? Why would the Burning Legion, which has destroyed countless planets, lose an entire army on a border planet like this? A lord. And the seal on his magic branch was removed? How did this continuous humiliation come about?" Facing Duque's aggressive questioning, the lords who had committed a crime could not help but lower their heads, regardless of whether he was willing or not. The Eridar twins, Manaroth, and the other lords of the abyss did not dare to meet Duque's burning gaze. Wherever Duque looked, they would lower their proud heads. Perhaps when they found out Duque's true identity, they would be so angry that they would have a heart attack or a cerebral hemorrhage on the spot. But at this moment, these proud soldiers who had been invincible in the universe for thousands of years could only listen to Duque's lecture like obedient children. Thousands of years of continuous victories have given you meaningless arrogance and underestimation of your enemies. This was a disgrace brought about by carelessness. This was also the shame of the entire Burning Legion. Enough. That's enough, you useless people. From this moment on, all of you will listen to my instructions. Those who disobey will be personally punished by His Majesty Sardras in the twisting nether for your worthless soul and body. Every Void Lord, be it the Eridar twins or the Lords of the Abyss who had joined the army later, shuddered violently. If it was the boss of a rival, it would be no different from farting. But this time it was Sardras who was angry, and the direct superiors of all the demons, Kil'jaeden and Archimonde, vented their anger at the same time. This was something that no one could bear. Duque pointed outside the city. There are more than 500,000 inferior creatures who think of themselves as nobles approaching this city. Manaroth, bring all the lords of the abyss to destroy them. Even though he was a little hesitant, Manaroth did not dare to disobey. He immediately answered, yes. At this moment, a strange seal started to float above Duque's left palm. It was the rune shield that had been destroyed by Malfurion and controlled the magic branch of the Well of Eternity. Duque cleared his throat and lowered his voice. My heart aches. The Eredar warlock leader of the army actually told me that it would take at least 2 months to repair this little thing made by this inferior race. Is this the power of the warlock squad that the army is so proud of? How could you tolerate the super mage who wiped out an entire army of ours, and used the power of the Well of Eternity beneath our feet to pour his magic on the heads of the great warriors of the army? Be it the Gemini or the warlock leader Ganisak, they all lowered their heads in shame and pressed their foreheads heavily against the cold ground. They were not pretending to be ashamed. Be it Auras or Queen Saloras, they were truly ashamed. The magic of the army was more inclined towards attack and destruction. They were not good at this kind of control-type magic. Moreover, the rune shield that had been made by a few Breaking Dawn archmages back then had a level of finesse comparable to the magic of the army. The palm-sized rune shield had more than 1,024 magic formations of various sizes, and each formation was interconnected. The large formations were only the size of the smallest screw, and the small ones could not be seen with the naked eye and could only be sensed with the mind. Moreover, the charm shield was connected to the magic control circuits on the branches. Even if he wanted to build a new controller, it would take him at least a year and a half to figure out the circuits and password locks on the branches. There was no way he could build a new controller. 2 months to rebuild this rune shield that had already been more than 1/3 destroyed by nature magic. This was the answer that Ganisak and the Gemini came up with after studying it for an entire day and bragging to the extreme. However, with the pressure from the 3 big shots of the army above them, the 3 of them did not dare to participate in the slightest and only dared to give a deadline of 2 months. Duque glanced at the 3 shivering Eredar warlock lords and sneered. Ganisak, stay here and help me. As for Auras and Saloras, go to the outer city of Azhara and watch it for me. Don't let any more rats slip in. Yes. The Eredar Gemini trembled and finally accepted the order. A few days ago, they were still noble lords and chief adjutants by Kill Jaden's side. Now, because of a single failure, they were actually sent by Duque to guard the door. This humiliation was truly unforgettable. However, they did not dare to act up. Because of their mistakes, Duque was already being lenient towards them. Of course, demons were all ungrateful fellows. They would definitely write down the 3 words infernal affairs in the little black notebook in their hearts. Duque did not care. He was here to dig a hole. When the day came when he buried the Burning Legion, would he care whether the Burning Legion hated him or not? Duque laughed shamelessly in his heart. Chapter 1041. Malfurion felt that his view of the world was collapsing. He had been captured. Beyond his imagination, as the one who had ruined the Burning Legion's plan, he had already prepared for the worst. In the dark power that had captured him, he had seen how the 2 female demon lords guarding the shield were punished. He had also heard the strange human lord who had captured him say that a vanguard of the Burning Legion had been destroyed because of him. Logically speaking, the Burning Legion should not have let him go after he had caused such a huge amount of damage. Malfurion could not stop thinking to himself, Tyrande, I have finally saved Cadores at least for the time being. Malfurion believed that he could welcome the end of his soul with a smile. Even if what awaited him on the road ahead was the most terrifying torture. However, there was no torture of any kind, not even a small punishment of the soul. He was like a spectator, imprisoned in a small soul ring on the Lord of the Infernal Realm's finger. Although he clearly heard the strange lord say that he would torture him and force him to reveal the method he had used to sneak into Azhara, he seemed to have been forgotten. The human lord who had defected to the Burning Legion did not pay any attention to him at all. Forgotten? He really hoped that it was true. Very soon, Malfurion discovered that the Infernal Realm was punishing him in the most cruel way in the world. First, the Infernal Realm stuck the soul ring to a metal tube. Only when the image from the outside and the sound from the vibration of the metal tube did he realize the despicable face of Queen Azhara. As the queen who had single-handedly introduced the Burning Legion, she had actually chosen to send an assassin to kill a loyal subject who resisted the destruction of the Burning Legion. Late at night the next day, when Malfurion saw Ravenkay's head with a clear expression of disbelief through the soul crystal, Malfurion felt that his world was beginning to collapse. Perhaps this lord who was willing to sacrifice his life and soul for the queen was unwilling to believe until the moment of his death that the captain of the queen's guards would kill him. The assassination of Ravencase and the leaderless state of the king's army were not the worst. The most terrifying thing was that the shield that Malfurion thought would take months to repair was repaired by the infernal realm. Although the force of nature did not completely destroy the magic gear, it was more than 300 years ago that the magic gear was built. A lot of information from back then had been lost in the war. Even Queen Azhara said that it was impossible for her to provide complete information. However, this silent lord of the infernal underworld was as relaxed as if he was playing with mud. In front of several demon lords, he spent only 3 hours to create a brand new runic shield. Malfurion was not an arcanist, but through his soul crystal he could clearly see that there were close to 10 Breaking Dawn mages, including Savis, Eridar and the twin demons who had injured him. All of them had shocked expressions on their faces. It was a skill far beyond this era. At first there were only a few mages observing, but later on even Kill Jaden's will personally came. This lord of the infernal underworld did not stop for even half a second. In order to restore the period of time that several Breaking Dawn archmages had bitterly worked on for several years, ignoring the lack of blueprints and recasting the incomparably intricate multiple control spell formation control system, this human liege used his nimble fingers to tug at close to 100 strands of mana that were thinner than hair, easily accomplishing what so many magic liege had failed to do. The moment Duque finished, Kill Jaden did not even look at him again, nor did he consider whether Duque's newly created runic shield needed to be tested. He simply said, "Well done, infernal underworld. After opening the door you will receive a reward above your standard." Kill Jaden's will immediately left. Evidently he had more important things to do. Previously, because the mana of the Well of Eternity had been diverted, the matter of opening the teleportation door could only be put on hold. This directly caused the army fleet waiting in the distorted void to come to a standstill. Now there had to be a commander to restart the preparations that had been stalled. That commander was definitely not Archimonde, who was in charge of charging and breaking through the enemy lines. Duque, who bowed respectfully to send Kill Jaden off, straightened his body again. In his shadow form, his face outlined a cold and arrogant contour. Tell Manaroth that his enemies will lose the mana that they are so proud of the moment the army attacks. Duke's words were like a death sentence to the king's supporters. In fact, ever since returning to 10,000 years ago when he had mistakenly entered the distorted void, Duque had been thinking about whether to save these night elves who had endlessly courted death in the ancient war. While the high elves who had led the Burning Legion in were not worthy of pity, Duque still gave up on the people who had come to protect the king after much consideration. If Ravencase had successfully rescued Empress Azhara from the Burning Legion, what would have happened? This was originally a topic worth investigating. Unfortunately, Duque was not interested. Duque did not believe that the nobles of the High Elves who were also part of the king's party had not heard any rumors. Deep down, the king's party still pursued endless arcane magic and absolute rule over the continent. However, they belonged to the party that had been abandoned by the Empress. Everything they had done was purely because they were unwilling to be abandoned, and they wanted to fight for power and revenge. War had always required sacrifices. In order to make the Burning Legion suffer as a human, Duque had no qualms about abandoning Cador, who was not even considered part of the human alliance at this point in time. Moreover, no matter how cruel it was, Duque was only maintaining the original history. Thus, half a day later, Duque unsurprisingly received news that the 500,000 elves had almost been completely defeated. Although it was said to be almost, it was because there were a few experts who surprised the army lords. With their superior individual combat power, they had blocked the attacks of more than 10 lords, including Manaroth and 100,000 elite demons, giving the remaining elves an incomparably precious half an hour. Lord Sphinx, that mantis shrimp of yours has defected to the enemy. He even killed the Lord of the Abyss, Brugerton, with his own hands, Queen Saloras reported. While ridiculing Grandpa Ho's abyssal lord Nemesis Halo in his heart, Best Actor Duke let out a cold laugh. Whatever. Anyway, Lord Archimonde is about to descend. All those who resist on this planet will meet their end. On the 7th day after Malfurion destroyed the rune shield, Duque opened the largest teleportation gate in the history of this world, according to his agreement with Kil Jaden. The commander of the Burning Legion, Archimond, descended. Chapter 1042. Ever since the Burning Legion began to use the power of the Well of Eternity, the dark water of the well had never been calm. It was in a state of turbulence almost all the time. But it had never been like this, with waves far higher than the ones in the Forbidden Palace. The dark water of the well shot up into the sky, roaring as it clashed and collided with each other, stirring up rings of magical mist. Then lightning flashed and the sky flashed gold, crimson, and finally faded to the standard yellow-green of dark energy. The sky seemed to have split open and a huge hole was formed between the torn clouds. Accompanied by the rumbling of thunder, it was as if thousands of stars had fallen from the universe. The ink-like dark light crossed the endless void and descended on the side of the Well of Eternity, on the huge oval-shaped portal that was over 100 meters tall. The surface of the portal, which was originally empty, rippled violently, as if thousands of half-dragons were running wildly on the surface of the mirror, emitting a strong sense of shock and ear-piercing roar. Over 1,000 high elves of various sizes stood not far from the portal under the leadership of the queen. Together with a large number of demonic guards, they lined up in neat rows to welcome the arrival of this important figure of the Burning Legion. The massive magic had caused a drastic change in the weather, and the thoughts of the high elves were like this stormy night. No one knew if they were about to usher in a storm of change or a true destruction. Only Queen Azhara and Savis, with the most excited hearts, looked forward to the next scene. This was the most capable general of the Creator, in their hearts. How would they get along with Lord Archimond? When the ripples on the portal reached the most intense moment, a pair of green-skinned giant hands finally broke through the barrier of space, and a few fingers as thick as horse carriages stretched out from the portal. Soon, a giant taller than the most majestic Forbidden Palace in Azhara stepped out of the portal. The shock that the high elves felt when they first saw Archimond was indescribable. It was as if they had really seen a god descending, and they all prostrated on the ground, maintaining a kneeling posture, not daring to move. Queen Azhara lifted her lily-like white dress and jogged all the way to Archimond. She cleared her throat and sang in her incomparably sweet voice. Queen Azhara of Caldorii pays her respects to Lord Archimond. Originally, the beautiful queen still had a lot to say, but who would have thought that this incomparably mighty and domineering army commander would not even pay attention to the queen? Instead, he turned his head and looked at the black man, who was even smaller than the queen. Infernal affairs. After making this statement that outsiders could not understand, Archimond ignored everyone and took a step that was dozens of meters long. He stepped on the ruins of the outer city of Azhara, making a loud sound of crushing debris, and left on his own. A gust of cold wind blew. Suddenly it was very cold. Everyone felt that Queen Azhara's passionate heart had been chilled by Archimond's arrogance and rudeness, turning into winter snow that was blown away by the gust of wind. What was the meaning of sticking warm noodles to cold buttocks? This was it. They sacrificed their own people and betrayed their own country, and this was the result they got in exchange. Whether it was Queen Azhara or Savis, they all had a look of disbelief on their faces. No, it should be said that they were dumbfounded. At this moment, almost all of the high elves felt that something was wrong. If the Burning Legion or their god really valued them, would they behave like this? Would the Creator Sargeras really do as he promised and grant them greater power? Humph! Archimond, you bastard! One day you will have your retribution. Looking in the direction that Archimond had left, Duque, who was cursing in the Eridar language, spat on the ground. Not to mention Queen Azhara, who had recently become overly self-conscious and had started to diligently study the Eridar language, or Savis, who had always been a lapdog. Even the high elves who did not know the Eridar language could easily feel Duque's anger towards Archimond. It wasn't just Duque. The Eridar twins and the group of Eridar magi were obviously unhappy with Archimond. Queen Azhara felt that she seemed to have caught on to something. Duque bowed to the queen. Although it was not very formal, it was still a show of respect. Then he spoke in the Caldorii language. My apologies, Your Majesty. Please ignore that brute Archimond. Although he is the commander of the Burning Legion, he is actually a battle maniac who only knows how to fight and kill. Other than killing and destruction, his brain basically has no capacity for anything else. Of course, he is also the #1 warrior of the Legion. Then you are. Of course we are serving the great and wise Lord Jaden. Movie King Duque appropriately took a side in front of everyone and showed his respect for Jaden. Those who were with Archimonde had all left. The ones left here were of course Jaden's loyal followers. Even in a major battle, the subordinates of the two demon commanders would work together. Working together was one thing, but whether or not they were happy with each other was another matter. How could the intense competition that had lasted for more than 20,000 years be dissolved so easily? Seeing this scene, Queen Azhara subconsciously applied the template of the elves' court struggles to the Burning Legion. Of course, to fool the high elves one had to have something concrete. Duque rattled on, speaking at a speed that a newbie would never be able to keep up with, to the Eridar twins beside him. After hearing this, because Duque had opened the door in time, the twins, who had recovered from their state of atonement, showed an expression that said, "You're so bad, but I understand you." The twins returned quickly, twisting their seductive waists as they pushed a cart full of things. However, everything on the cart was covered by a thick black magic cloak, making it impossible to see what was inside. Pushing the cart in front of Queen Azhara, Duque took off the magic cloak and revealed what was underneath. It was a super high magic crystal that emitted an emerald glow. Each of them was about the size of a 330 milliliters mineral water bottle before Duque traveled to this world, and they were all neatly cut into hexagonal prismatic crystal shapes. Duque took out a scroll from his sleeve and handed it to Sarvis, who was beside Queen Azhara. Duque said with a straight face, "These are the dark energy crystals that Kador has always wanted. As long as you modify your body according to the method on the scroll, you will have the chance to evolve yourself and make your body more adapted to dark energy. Of course, not everyone can adapt to the great dark energy. Inferior beings that cannot adapt will be ruthlessly eliminated." Chapter 1043. What about those who can adapt? Azhara asked. Duque smiled and didn't say anything. A cluster of dark rays shot out from his hand towards a collapsed wizard tower in the outer city. Darkness silently swallowed up everything around it. The entire 5-story wizard tower, along with the broken tiles and debris within a radius of 200 meters, turned into black nothingness in an instant. They were completely erased from this world. A few months ago I was just a survivor from a border planet that was conquered by the army. Fortunately, with the appreciation of Sololas and Auras, I was able to discover my abilities. Now I'm a mid-level Void Lord of the Burning Legion. No, you're already a high-level lord. Caught off guard, Jaden's will descended. Along with the appearance of a huge shadow, his loud voice resounded throughout the entire square. In an instant, all the lords and the high elves who had just gotten up knelt down again. Infernal Affairs, you've done well. The army has always appreciated talented and strong people. And you're their role model. So from today onwards you're a high-level lord. The rewards I've promised will definitely be yours. This is the list. Tell either Auras or Ras after you've made your choice. Jaden's fiery eyes glanced at Queen Azhara. Azhara, when you cooperate with Infernal Affairs and open the final door to welcome Lord Sardras, you'll get what you want. Thank you, Lord Jaden. Azhara bowed deeply. Jaden looked at Duque again. With Azhara City as the center, you'll be responsible for everything within a radius of 300 kilometers. As long as you don't make low-level mistakes like them. After the final door is opened, there will be more rewards. Thank you, Lord. Duque continued to act like a grandson. Infernal Affairs. When will the teleportation door that can allow Lord Sardras to pass through be built? Building a teleportation door that can allow Lord Archimonde to pass through is already the limit of what I can do now. The Guardian of Planet Azeroth has been alerted. Now that the planet's protective circle has been activated, I can't even teleport you, Sir Jaden, here before I get rid of the Guardian of this planet. Furthermore, it doesn't seem to be enough to simply use the power of the Well of Eternity. Jaden was not surprised by the answer. Get ready. When there's progress, I want you to open the portal immediately. No problem. Leave it to me, Infernal Affairs. Suddenly, Kil'jaeden changed the topic and transmitted his voice directly into Duque's spiritual sea. Infernal affairs, you just did a great thing. Archimonde considered Kal'dorii to be worthless, and such a clumsy approach was not advisable. That's why you didn't hesitate to use the dark energy gems given to you by the army as a reward for Kadores. I think you did the right thing. Thank you for your understanding, my lord. Inferior beings are destined to be eliminated. A powerful existence that believed in the army must be rewarded. I've already suggested this to Lord Sargeras. Before Kil'jaeden's voice trailed off, Sargeras's will had already descended. Sargeras praised Savis, who was loyal to him, and then forgave Savis for his failure in destroying the runic shield. Finally, he gave Savis the reward he had been dreaming of. My most loyal servant, Savis. I can grant you the power you desire, but this will change your form. Can you accept such a change? It doesn't matter what I become. Please grant me power. Looking at Savis, who was trembling with ecstasy, Duque secretly sighed in his heart. The High Elf's obsession with power had reached a point that a human like him could not understand. Unlike the original history, Savis was killed by Malfurion while he was guarding the runic shield. In this life, because of the Eridar Gemini's intervention, Savis was still alive and kicking. But now, it seemed that he was going to become the first satyr in the history of Azeroth. Queen Azhara's mouth twitched, but she did not stop Savis in the end. Just like that, under the watchful eyes of the High Elves, a yellow-green light passed through the portal and shot onto Savis's body. Sargeras had personally forged a body for Savis. A body with split hooves, unkempt goat legs, goat-like horns, razor-sharp claws, and a long lion's tail. Although Savis did not even manage to guard the precious runic shield, he was the first elf to connect with Sargeras's will in the process of researching the Well of Eternity. As a guide, as a model example of buying a horse's bones with money, Sargeras must have thought that Savis had considerable value, so other than transforming this fellow who was equivalent to a fanatic, he also gave Savis a special power. I confer upon you the ancestor of satyrs. Yes. From that moment on, Savis had the ability to use a demon's curse to turn other creatures into satyrs. This was also the reason for the birth of the second, third, and many more satyrs in history. And the new satyrs could then corrupt the next generation of satyrs, allowing the satyrs to flourish. Savis's new body made Queen Azhara feel a little melancholy. Obviously, this did not conform to the queen's aesthetics. However, this was Savis's own choice, and even she could not say anything. But when the queen saw the fanatical gazes of many high elves staring at Savis, who was bursting with demigod-level magic, the queen suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. That was the displeasure of her power being divided. However, she, who was in a state of leading a wolf into the house, no longer had any right to say no. Time passed quickly. Because Duque opened the portal in advance and brought in the main force of the Archimonde Burning Legion, and because of Krasus's public relations with the dragons fell into a standstill, the elven army was naturally beaten like dogs. After losing Lord Ravencase, the elven aristocrat who succeeded him was scum. In the end, nearly 1 million elves were slaughtered and their territory fell again and again. At the end of the first month after the Archimonde's arrival, the main city of the elves, Surlama, fell. In the second month, the dragons participated in the war, but at this time as the guardian of the earth, Nesario rebelled as he did in history. In the name of forging the dragon soul, he directly caused the dragons to bleed. The situation was becoming more and more unfavorable to the native races of Azeroth. In the first battle of the third month, Tyrande Whisperwind, who was exhausted, was captured by Savis. Chapter 1044. The failure of Surma City could not be blamed on the nobles and Tyrande, who were the successors of Ravencase. Ravencase's first victory was an abnormal product, and it could not even be said to be lucky. It was simply a matter of extreme risk to count on when the ultimate weapon in the hands of the enemy would be activated. The power of the Well of Eternity was cut off by Duque, and most of the elven mages died. Furthermore, in order to make up for their first failure, the Burning Legion gathered many times the combat power of the elven army every time they attacked. Mannoroth led more than 10 Void Lords to charge together. How could the elves who did not have that many heroic domain masters resist? That's right, when moon goddess Elune contacted the dragons to support them, the dragons were also unlucky. At this point in time, even though the dragons had the largest number, ever since the formation of the dragon army in Azeroth, they had never experienced any large-scale battles. The dragons with some experience were mostly land battles, and they usually went to bully the giants on the ground. They did not have the corresponding aerial combat experience. Even though they had a natural advantage in terms of physical strength, the dragons were at a great disadvantage against the aerial forces of the Apocalypse Guards, which were 10 times their number. There was a huge difference in experience and numbers. As soon as the two sides clashed, the dragons were shot down like turkeys. Tyrande, Illidan, and Ronan, who were watching the battle from the ground, were stunned and did not know what to say. The number of dragons and Apocalypse Guards that fell was about 1 to 2, but the problem was that the Burning Legion had more aerial forces. The Apocalypse Guards covered the sky, and it seemed like there was no end to them. Originally, when the 5 dragon aspects attacked together, they had indeed suppressed the demon army. Their combat power was unparalleled, but ever since the appearance of the almost indomitable super demon Archimonde, the 5 dragon aspects had suffered a setback. Ronan was dumbfounded. Only at this moment did he realize how lucky his group was to defeat Archimonde 10,000 years later. That was because Archimonde had most of his power suppressed. This Archimonde had used the powerful power of the Well of Eternity to directly break through the planet's defense circle and summon his complete form. At his peak, Archaron's was simply an invincible existence. The claws of the 5 dragon aspects could not even leave a deep wound on his body. Even if they scratched a meter-deep wound, it would be perfectly repaired by the power of darkness in the next instant. Of all times, the damn Nethario jumped in the wrong direction. Just like in history, he used the demon soul to trap the dragon race. In his desperation, Krasis was willing to risk changing history to persuade the Red Dragon Queen not to inject her power into the dragon's soul. However, he was not an official member of the dragon race in this time and space, so his advice was ignored. Bad news came one after another. Tyrande, who had exhausted all of her mana on the battlefield, had been captured by the Satyr King Savis. This was undoubtedly a bolt out of the blue for Illidan, who was the only one left. Seeing Illidan's uncertain expression, Ronan finally realized that he had to pull the last force of Azeroth into the fray as soon as possible. He said to Grom and the others, "You guys stay in Fort Raven. I'll go find Cenarius." Originally, it would have been best to let Malfurion, the eldest disciple of Cenarius, negotiate, but Malfurion's soul was trapped. Ronan could only bite the bullet and go. In the city of Azeroth, Duque looked at the huge empty shelf in a daze. Without enough mana to tear open the dimensional barrier reinforced by the planet's magic circle, this portal was destined to be a decoration. However, it was Archimonde's job to deal with the Guardian or plunder enough mana. Du's bad taste kicked in, and he made the portal that was supposed to greet Sargeras into the style of the Dark Portal. The portal that was filled with the evil wind of darkness even gained the appreciation of the twins of Erida. The pair of beautiful demon sisters even hinted that Duque could have a friendly conversation with them at night to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. As an upright and reliable young man, Duque decisively refused. "Oh, that's a pity. Infernal affairs, you clearly exude the scent of a female." Elises licked her coquettish lips. "Actually, sometimes I even feel that you're not a part of the Burning Legion. Compared to those violent and barbaric fellows, you're too law-abiding. Although the Legion doesn't mind adding some capable and disciplined strong people," Queen Selaras said pointedly. Duque opened his hands in a serious manner, and 2 extremely pure black flames emerged from his palms. "Sorry, I love power the most. Only power is my ultimate pursuit." Hehe. No one said that it's bad to pursue power. But other than power, other Eridar warlocks also have their own pursuits, such as... The twins probed faintly, or rather they were guiding Duque's attention. In fact, Duque had long discovered that a high elf lady was happily chatting with an Eridar warlock in the bushes 100 yards away. Duque knew that he couldn't stay here any longer. Before accomplishing his ultimate goal of tricking the Burning Legion, Duque had to pretend to be a fallen person who yearned for the life of a demon. The problem was that he was too obedient and followed the rules. Previously, Kil'jaeden had counted on him to open the door for Archimonde to descend, and the other small details could be ignored. Now that Archimonde had descended, in fact, Duque was no longer a necessary candidate for the Legion in Azeroth. If Duque wanted to carry out his plan, he had to continue to stay in the core position of the Legion. Then he had to think of ways to discredit himself and continue to gain Kill Jaden's trust. It wasn't easy to deceive a demon commander. Duque was already thinking if he should find a chance to go to the front lines and slaughter thousands of night elves. On the other side, the twins were still egging Duque on. Actually, I know that Lord Sargeras doesn't like people like Queen Azhara. That's right. He had a strong taste and liked Garona. If you like, you can totally take that so-called queen and then use your identity as a high-rank lord to announce that these high elves are your exclusive slave race. Sigh, I haven't even succeeded yet and I'm already tearing down the plank? Duque shrugged helplessly. It's a pity that I don't like to climb trees and I don't like to climb a tree with dark purple bark. Auras rolled her eyes. What about her? Duque suddenly saw the figure of the priestess who had pale purple skin and was a little shorter than him. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 1045. Duque was someone who paid attention to the bigger picture. If he did not, he would have been destroyed during the first Dark Portal. Even though he was known as the destroyer of history, he was still trying his best to control the direction of the bigger picture and make Azeroth's situation better. Duque was a very timid person, but it was this kind of person who could always burst out with unimaginable courage when he was forced into a corner, slaying demons and ghosts along the way, even earning himself the title of a great hero. The conflicted Duque was, of course, very clear about the current situation. If he did not get rid of the Burning Legion during the War of the Ancients, or if he was exposed and died here, then everything would be over. If he did not get rid of the Burning Legion, Azeroth would be a land of death in 10,000 years. At the same time, Nosdorm would definitely be killed now, not 10,000 years later. If he died here, even if the outcome of the War of the Ancients was the same, it would be meaningless. Thus, preserving himself and maintaining the original outcome of the War of the Ancients were parallel and not conflicting. Duque never thought of himself as a saint who was compassionate and wanted to save all the innocent in the world. Thus, people and things that went against these 2 points could be sacrificed when necessary. Even if millions of elves had died since the start of the War of the Ancients, he did not have any psychological burden. To Duque, this was no different from when he commanded the Alliance's soldiers on the battlefield during the War of the Dark Portal and World War II. But when he saw Tyrande, this old comrade, Duque felt his balls ache. Just a second ago he had used the excuse of not wanting to climb a tree to reject Gemini's probing. The next second, Tyrande, what was the meaning of this? Even if he was unjustly attacked, this was not the way to lie down. This was like a beautiful backflip 10 times and then a 3,600-degree flip to the side to hit the muzzle of a gun. Do you want me to slap myself in the face and pretend to be gay? Do you believe that Gemini will immediately find a few strong and handsome men to trick me? Moreover, with a female demon like Gemini, it was obvious whether Tyrande had entered Duque's aesthetic range or not. At this moment, Duque suddenly entered a huge crisis that concerned his life and the survival of his soul. As long as he took a single wrong step, he would immediately be consigned to eternal damnation. Of course, as a traitor, he could immediately kill his way out of Azhara City and return to the Night Elf side. However, if that were to happen, how would he be able to continue with the act of an egg pretending to rebel? If he rebelled and the Burning Legion didn't believe Illidan and killed him, then this show wouldn't be able to continue. Duque swallowed his saliva. Gemini immediately understood what Seiji meant. Auraz's eyes were like silk. Hee. No wonder our Lord of the Infernal Affairs doesn't like ordinary goods. Queen Solola's even came closer and blew a breath of hot air on Duque's neck. A high priest of the indigenous gods. This is indeed something that those coquettish bitches can't compare to. Infernal Affairs, good eyes. What else could he say in the face of such unreliable likes from the Eridar twins? The only thing he could do in the spiritual world was to put on his signature 45-degree tearful pose. Actually, you guys don't understand my heart. I am innocent. I'm just a lowly and cowardly university animal. Which one of you will give me a yellow river? I want to wash away the stain on my name as the Duke of Beasts. Savis, who had become the Satyr King, strode into the hall with a few high elves who had voluntarily become satyrs. The unconscious tyrant, who was being carried by the back of her collar and swinging around like a puppet, not only attracted the attention of Duque and the others, but also the other Void Lords. "Yo, Savis, looks like you brought back a good toy." A Lord of Morgar walked towards Savis. Morgar was a one-story tall humanoid demon. At first glance it looked like an extremely burly humanoid fatty. Upon closer inspection, one would notice that it had a thick and deformed arm, as well as a huge foot with only 2 sharp toes. Savis frowned when he saw the newcomer, especially when he saw the skulls of the night elf priestesses tied around his waist that were filled with fear and malevolent expressions. "Barbaro. This is the high priest of the moon goddess Elun," Tyrant Whisperwind. Savis seemed to emphasize. "So what? I love torturing and killing the priestesses of the indigenous gods. Although many of them are still calling out their god's name until the last moment of their lives, most of them crumble when they see me torturing and killing their companions. They pray that I won't hurt them. But evidently, the row of heads was the result of those who begged for mercy. "Yo, Infernal, aren't you going to snatch that priestess? Once she falls into Barbaro's hands, she'll be gone soon." Queen Sayla Ras incited Duque. At this moment something unexpected happened. Perhaps it was Barbaro's foul breath that woke Tyrant up. Tyrant retaliated the moment she woke up. An unsuccessful counterattack. Savis, who was still carrying Tyrant, defeated her counterattack with a single spell. Originally, Barbaro should have grabbed Tyrant and pierced her body with his claws. But at this moment a miracle happened. Tranquil moonlight suddenly shone from Tyrant's body, forming billions of tiny white runes that wrapped around her like a white veil. As the Lord of Morgar, Barbaro's deformed and thick arms could easily crush a dwarven steam tank into dough. However, his claws could not penetrate the 5 centimeters of space on Tyrant's body. It was a miraculous layer of absolute protection. What power is this? In a fit of rage, Barbaro grabbed Tyrant's petite body and flung her away. Tyrant was thrown into a daze. This time it wasn't just Duque. Even the other lords were interested in Tyrant. There were more than 10 lords in this hall. Most of them had just been teleported here and were still waiting for orders to go to the front lines. They all gathered and began to attack Tyrant with all sorts of methods. It was obvious that Elun was displaying her miracles to these barbaric void lords. The lords could seal Tyrant's attack power and even knock her unconscious, but they could not truly harm or torture her. The lords howled, but there was nothing they could do. This made Duque secretly heave a sigh of relief. According to the original history, the demon lords, who were at their wits' end, could only imprison Tyrant. Then there was the legendary scene of Tyrant's escape. Suddenly Elises sneered. "You useless things. Since you can't deal with her, then scram." Sayla Ras put a hand on Duque's shoulder. "Oh, infernal affairs, as long as you nod, we can help you deal with this Tyrant." Duque spat out a mouthful of blood. "Damn it." Chapter 1046. The other lords have already given up on healing. "What are you doing here, Gemini? Scram to the side. If Tyrant managed to escape in 2 days, everything would be fine." Duque really wanted to give Gemini a few slaps. Just then Duque suddenly thought of another problem. This seemed to be his fault. Without Duque stirring up trouble within the Burning Legion, Gemini would not have come to Azhara. Also, because he had many subordinates, in order to temporarily stabilize the High Elves, he ended up giving the High Elves a large number of demonic crystals. Now the Queen and her subordinates were deeply grateful to the Burning Legion. In history, once the Archaerons descended, the entire Legion ignored the High Elves who had lost their value. If he remembered correctly, it should be Kael, that's grandfather, Dasrima Sunstrider, who felt abandoned by the Burning Legion and chose to turn to the light. He released Tyrant, which led to Tyrant's miraculous return. Coupled with the fact that Goddess Elun had endorsed Tyrant and publicly praised her for her steadfastness, the Arcane faction had been eliminated and most of the Nature faction's demigods had knelt down. This was how Tyrant, as the High Priestess, was able to rise to power. Alright, it's all a mess now. Even if Goddess Elun protected Tyrant, no one would be able to release Tyrant. Just as Duque was thinking, the female demon Elises came up to add fuel to the fire. Oh, infernal affairs. Do you like this woman? Say something for us sisters. Seeing that he could not avoid it, Duque decided to show off. His domineering gaze swept across the place as he sneered softly. Since no one can handle it, then let Gemini handle it. Most of the people here were mid-level or low-level lords. With Duque, a high-level void lord, speaking of course, they did not dare to have any objections. At this time Queen Sailor smirked. By the way, Your Excellency, this is a private matter. Duque firmly believed that Alun would definitely protect Tyrant, so he did not hesitate to show off to the end. He elegantly turned around and walked away. As he left he said, "Hee hee." It was obvious that unless the 3 heavyweights of the Burning Legion took action, no one would be able to do anything to this woman. Well, 2,000 top-grade demonic crystals, I bet you can't handle it. If you really can't do anything to her, just throw her into the highest level prison and lock her up for now. On the other side, Tyrant was being tormented by the group of Void Dukes. However, she stubbornly stood up and glared at Duque's back. She did not understand the language of Eridar, but she instinctively felt that this group of evil and violent lords were using her as a wager. A pair of purple and a pair of crimson Eridar demon hooves stood in front of Tyrant. Tyrant raised her head and looked at the 2 beautiful faces filled with mockery and malice. She felt like vomiting. She really wanted to turn her angry gaze into the moon god's arrow and shoot these 2 bewitching demonesses in front of her. Unfortunately, with her power completely sealed, it was difficult for her to even move a finger. Let's go, beauty. Let big sister teach you how to be a qualified slave. Elisa spoke in perfect Kadori language. Don't even think about it. I will never give in. Tyrant's voice was sonorous and forceful. That might not necessarily be the case. Queen Sailor smiled wickedly. Tyrant could not help but feel her heart palpitate as she looked at the pair of eyes filled with absolute confidence. The great moon goddess Alun will definitely protect me. As if in response to her vow, the faint layer of white light around Tyrant seemed to become even brighter. Suddenly, Gemini grabbed both of Tyrant's arms and lifted her up. Let's go. Beauty. Let us tell you, at first it was 1 sentence each, but in the end it was Gemini who spoke at the same time. There are many places in this world where the moon cannot shine. Tyrant felt her heart beating wildly. For the first time in her life she realized that anxiety and hesitation could swallow her heart. It was late at night. Duque had a side hall in the magnificent Azhara Palace. Archimonde had come and gone and the High Elves had reaped the benefits. Queen Azhara almost wanted to give her main hall to Duque. At this time Duque really could not sleep. According to the script, once Illidan pretended to be under Sargeras and stole the demon's soul, everything would be settled. Why did this mess with Tyrant happen? Duque's face was full of gloom. Damn Illidan, you have to do your best. That's your high priestess, your chosen one. You can't even protect her and you're counting on me, an outsider? In the end, this is all Nosdormu's fault. Damn it. If you didn't throw me into the twisting nether and let me be a hero of justice, go through the motions, you'd be good, I'd be good, everyone would be good. Then everyone would be happy. Speaking of which, I'm feeling uneasy tonight. Something big must have happened. No, I have to confirm my escape route. Just as Duque was letting his imagination run wild in the long river of history, Nosdormu, who had been cursed by Duque, had actually been working. An ancient force violently attacked Nosdormu's dragon body. His time dragon body could easily traverse time in the void, but at this moment he had a terrifying premonition that he was about to be torn to pieces. The 4 major elements of earth, water, fire, and wind were driven by a primitive and uncontrollable mysterious force, spinning wildly around his body. Not to mention the time point of the ancient war 10,000 years ago. Even if he forced himself to stay where he was, he would have a premonition that his life would be in danger at any time. The mysterious force in front of him was getting more and more terrifying. Nosdormu estimated that even if he forced himself to resist, he wouldn't be able to last until the ancient war. Nosdormu sighed and suddenly spat out a small dragon's breath in front of him. After that, the giant time dragon king seemed to be pulled by something, and was suddenly pulled back to the door of darkness 15 years ago. This strange dragon's breath, which was like a small flying arrow, easily passed through thousands of blurry scenes and everything in the world. It suddenly passed through the barrier of time and space and silently appeared behind Duque. Originally, the situation in the next moment should have been the gathering of a large amount of time power, continuously attacking Duque's senses. Nozdormu would never know that in order to prevent Duque from being frightened or confused, he had set up a few more mental barriers. All inquiries had to be filtered by the system elf before reaching Duque's senses. In the end, Duque had no idea what was going on. At this moment, Duque was shocked to find that the door to his bedroom had been pushed open. Tyrant, who was wearing a long white nightgown, flashed in. There was no trace of moon god power on her body. Duque was dumbfounded. Chapter 1047. The Burning Legion was not going to be easy. Duque knew this from the first day he crossed over to the world of Azeroth. Duke's balls ached as he looked at the system's highlighted red outline on his retina. The Eridar Gemini was hiding in a house 100 meters away. Their devil horns and hooves were clearly outlined and Duke's balls ached. This was the Gemini's test and also Kill Jaden's test. A person who did not know how to conquer, destroy, or kill, no matter how strong he was, could not be given such a heavy responsibility. If Duque dared to escape with Tyron now, Archimonde might come back with a group of Lords of the Abyss in the next moment. The moonlight was as calm as water flowing on Tyron's body. However, it was as if flowing water had hit an invisible barrier and the moonlight was repelled. Duque was stunned. This was not because Elune refused to bless Tyrant, but because Tyrant was using her own will to resist Elune's power entering her body. Tyrant's nightgown was not tied with a rope. She was purely using her left hand to pull the left hem over the right. It was this half-naked action that made Duque's mouth dry up. Yes. Duque could not deny that he was actually a fan of elves. This was evident from the fact that he had 3 high elves in his house. As for Tyrant, who had been imagined by countless players as a Dijinshi, Duque did have a slight desire in his heart. Originally, there would not have been anything but in the shadow form, especially when the dark energy in his body was not converted for a long time. Dooku was stunned to discover that his body had a kind of restless feeling. This feeling was not good. It was the temptation of darkness. Duque secretly took a deep breath, then pretended to be ignorant. Why don't you let your goddess protect you? Tyrant, who had been silent all this while, suddenly erupted like a volcano. Her eyebrows furrowed and an expression of anger appeared on her face. Demon, what are you pretending for? You were the one who instructed those 2 damned female demons to bring me to the twisting nether and threaten me with the safety of over 100 of my sisters. Are you still going to pretend to be innocent here? All right. As you wish. I'm here. Tyrant was obviously gritting her teeth in anger, but as she spoke, her aura weakened. Her originally fierce steps became soft and small, and she finally knelt in front of Duque. 2 streams of tears rolled down Tyrant's beautiful face. She sobbed uncontrollably. As long as you promise to let my sisters go and not kill them, I will fulfill my promise and become your possession. Duque's teeth hurt. His balls hurt. His head hurt. His entire body hurt. He finally understood what Gemini had done. Elune was indeed amazing. She was actually able to protect Tyrant in the midst of the enemy's formation. But in history it was only preserved because there were no intelligent demons like the Gemini twins. Gemini had broken Elune's seemingly invincible protection with just a little trick. They used a portal to bring Tyrant back to the twisting nether. Of course, Elune's power could not reach the twisting nether. As a result, they used a large amount of dark energy to wash away the protective barrier on Tyrant's body. The moment the barrier was broken, Tyrant's final trump card was shattered mercilessly. Needless to say, Gemini was very good at playing with people's hearts. They could have used violence to make Tyrant submit, but they chose a more effective method, taking hostages. The priestesses of Elune were like sisters, and that was how the famous Elune sisterhood came to be. Since that was the case, everything became simple. In fact, Gemini could have made Tyrant submit completely. But they were afraid that Duque would lose interest, and that was how things turned out. Duque knew that there was no way to resolve this matter peacefully. He frowned and flicked his left hand. 2 dark rays pierced through the wall and shot at Gemini, who was hiding 100 meters away. The attack was vicious, but there was a smile on his face. Hey, it's not polite to peek. Can you 2 please stay away from me? Duque did not intend to kill, and Gemini took it as a friendly invitation to leave. Gemini's bewitching giggles resounded in the night sky. This caused Tyron's expression to change again. At this moment, sitting on a luxurious three-seater sofa, the dark energy around Duque's body expanded, forming a huge black fog. Duque said in a deep voice, "Since you have sworn to become my possession, then come over." Tyron's body trembled and the tears in her eyes flowed even more. In the end, she stood up slowly as if she had made up her mind to fall into the abyss, and stepped into the black fog. Unexpectedly, she was caught the moment she stepped in and sat on Duque's lap. "Tyron, you've met Roddick and the others, right?" "I'm Roddick's teacher." Tyron's body trembled again. She never would have thought that the spellcaster that Roddick spoke of, who was hiding within the Burning Legion, was actually such a high-ranking Void Lord, the future star of the Burning Legion, the spellcaster. "You? Impossible." Tyron's eyes widened. "I also hoped that I wouldn't run into you. But the commander of the Burning Legion, Kil'jaeden, has already started to suspect me." Duque could be considered a straightforward person, and he explained in detail that he had mistakenly entered the Twisting Nether, and was caught as a test subject. In the end, he was modified by dark energy and became a lord. Aside from the fact that he and his group had transmigrated 10,000 years later, Duque told Tyron everything about himself and his plans. Tyron was so shocked that she could not close her mouth. This sounded like a fantasy story. "Spellcaster, you said that you purposely infiltrated the enemy camp to destroy the Burning Legion's main force, and then waited for the dragon aspects, Dragon Soul, to cooperate with you to blow up the portal and destroy the Burning Legion's main force?" Tyron could not keep up with Duque's train of thought. In the end, she was stunned by Duque's huge and crazy plan. "You've been to the Twisting Nether, and the Eridar twins should have shown you how huge the Burning Legion's fleet is, and how many demons there are, right?" Tyron recalled the countless dark-powered starships in the sky, and then the demonic army that filled every single one of them, and she shuddered. She could not help but nod. "There are too many demons. If we just let the Azeroth race fight them, they won't be able to kill them all even if they die 100 times. And as long as the demons don't die in the Twisting Nether, they can be resurrected infinitely. My plan is to destroy the Burning Legion's main force once and for all. But there's a precondition." Tyron's voice trembled as she continued, "You can't be exposed." "Yes. Make your choice. I can give you a chance to contact Alun. If you choose to leave, I will take you with me. It all depends on who will complete my plan. Of course, you can also choose to make a sacrifice." Chapter 1048. Tyron was dumbfounded. If not for the fact that millions of her brethren had been slaughtered by demons, she would not have been so sad and angry. If not for the fact that she could not resist the spread of evil, she would not have been captured and sent here. If not for the fact that she had seen with her own eyes how huge the Burning Legion's fleet was, she would not have felt so afraid. Perhaps Duque had given her a choice, but Duque, who did not feel the reality of the elves being slaughtered, did not realize that Tyron was actually forced into a dead end. Suddenly, Tyron's body stopped trembling, and her eyes that were starting to lose focus became determined again. She did not turn back and just sat on Duque's lap and said, "Can you pray for me one last time? I want to report what happened to you to Goddess Alun." "Yes." The black fog that enveloped the two dispersed. Tyron walked slowly towards the window with graceful steps. There, a large cluster of pure white moonlight illuminated a large piece of marble floor, making it look as if it was daytime. Gently taking off his nightgown, Duque, who was sitting on the sofa, saw a bewitching figure. The priestess began her prayer devoutly. Looking from behind, the towering peaks of Hyjal were actually wrapped around by two small golden snakes that emitted a demonic aura. The top of the snake's head was holding the small protruding stump of the world tree in its mouth. Duque suddenly felt that the dark energy in his heart seemed to be restless. The moonlight was incomparably gentle and beautiful. The pure and beautiful moonlight formed a sharp contrast with this perfect and seductive female figure. The prayer did not continue for long. Tyron turned back, revealing a beautiful face that was either crying or smiling. If one ignored the faint purple capillaries on her fair face, Duque suddenly realized that she really did look a little like the Windrunner sisters. The same determination, the same love for their brethren, and the same willingness to sacrifice themselves. Tyrant turned around without a word, and once again stepped into Duque's black fog, allowing the black fog to envelop her. She knew that this was because Duque had blocked all probing from the outside world. Duque's voice was dry. What did Alun say? Tyrant sat down beside Duque, not bothering to hide the bitterness on her face. She said, "I'm sorry, my child." Duque slapped his forehead. Damn it. He was speechless towards Alun. But if it was Alun, perhaps she had no other choice. There had been too many sacrifices and no one knew how much more they would have to pay to see the dawn of victory. In the face of a terrifying enemy like the Burning Legion, a priestess was nothing. Duque turned around and looked at Tyrant with a pained expression. At this moment he finally understood why Tyrant hated him so much when they first met 10,000 years later. It was because he had returned to the ancient war and caused such a mess. If he was Tyrant, he would also hate him for 10,000 years. However, this fallacy was also a pain in the ass. Duque, who had been in the dark portal for 15 years, had returned to the ancient war and offended Tyrant 10,000 years ago. In the end, Tyrant had taken revenge 10,000 years later. Thinking of how much Tyrant hated him at that point in time, Duque decided to go all out. Holding two Mount Hyjal, Duque spouted nonsense with a straight face. Everything is for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion, for the sake of victory. So, I'm sorry. Tyrant clenched her teeth and her cheeks were almost bleeding. She nodded heavily. I have long since sworn to give everything I have to Alun. Since this is the will of the goddess, I have no regrets. Alright, Miss Offering, please accept this terrifying combo from another world. Invented by Mr. Jean and brought to glory by Lord Wei, the godly technique, picking up girls. Sob sob. 10 minutes later. Please accept this invincible technique from Dongying from another world. Ito 48 hands. You. Duque had been fine at first, but the problem was that Duque's illness had flared up. For no reason at all, that the 7 major sins, which had not flared up for more than 10 years, suddenly flared up. Which one was it? Make a guess. If you guess wrong, it's my loss. Tyrant felt bitter on the spot. She had been shot. It was like a little girl who believed in the existence of Santa Claus had suddenly been fed more than 10 terabytes of action movies by a bad guy. Even though priestesses had regenerative abilities that surpassed priests, Tyrant whisperwind. Unfortunately, tragedy still befell her. The next morning, Duque, who had finally broken free from the 7 major sins state, could not find any words to describe this tragic battlefield. Wait. I need some quiet time. Alright, fortunately no one here would ask who quiet time was. Just as Duque assumed the pose of the thinker, a pair of eyes filled with anger, fear, humiliation, obedience, resignation, and other incomparably complex emotions met his. For a moment, Duque almost thought that he would have to endure 100 starfall attacks. But in the end, it was Tyrant who silently helped Duque put on his clothes. Seeing that Duque was still shrouded by the black fog, Tyrant pretended to be very docile as she hugged Duque from behind. The two of them were pressed together, and with her still tear-stained face she said something that did not match her expression at all. Don't lie to me. Otherwise, even if I die, my goddess and my sisters will hunt you down to the ends of the universe. Duque took a deep breath. I will definitely do my best to destroy the main force of the Burning Legion. At the very least, these demons will not be able to invade Azeroth for the next 10,000 years. I will remember your vow. Tyrant's expression was as gentle as water, but she was actually gritting her teeth as she spoke. At first, Tyrant had wanted to pretend to be a tamed slave and follow Duque out. Unfortunately, the moment she stood up, she immediately knelt down. She was so ashamed that she wanted to die. She tried to use the holy light to heal herself before continuing. The problem was that there was a kind of pain that was called residual pain. She could only give up. Duque sighed and walked out of the hall. As expected, he saw Eridar's Gemini with a mocking expression. Haha. Not bad, infernal affairs. We really did not misjudge you. Facing the Gemini's you know what I mean expression, Duque's face was full of righteousness, as if he did not understand what they were saying. The more Duque behaved like this, the more the Gemini believed that Duque had fallen. At this moment, outside of Azeroth, A knight wearing a hood and riding a shadowmaw panther approached the city walls. The hellhounds that were wandering outside the city were easily sucked dry by him. He almost killed his way all the way to the front of the city wall. A gate that had been strengthened with magic blocked him. The night elf guards who were loyal to the queen were glaring at him with their heads lowered. He walked forward and took off his hood. He was the famous Illidan's storm rage. "I am here to serve my queen," Illidan shouted. He was obviously not shouting at the guards. He was shouting at someone in the palace. "I am here to serve my queen, and the leader of the Burning Legion." Chapter 1049. That day Duque was a little bored. As the person in charge of the Burning Legion in Azhara, Duque needed to ensure that the forward operating base of Azhara would not fall. As for the portal that Salas always used, it was just a decoration. Everyone knew that before killing the dragon aspect or obtaining a stronger source of magic, it could not be opened. Jaden did not rush Duque and he was happy to be at ease. After browsing through the battle reports of the Burning Legion's higher-ups on the magic mirror that could transmit information, Duque yawned. Basically, all paths were swept away and there was no resistance at all. Only the northwest side of Old Kalimdor near Mount Hyjal, the Burning Legion was stuck in a quagmire of resistance. This was because a large number of demigods in Azeroth had made their move. They tried to counterattack the Legion, consciously avoiding Archimonde and only targeting the other legions on the flanks. The Burning Legion lost a few lords and returned to the Twisting Nether. Archimonde was furious and sent a few of the more capable lords who were on standby in Azhara to the front lines. But this had nothing to do with Duque. The queen invited me to watch a dance? Duque tilted his head when he received the message from the 3 elven maids. Initially, Duque did not want to go, but Duque did not want to go back to his palace, because he did not know how to face Tyrant. After some thought, Duque agreed. After handing over some trivial matters to the Gemini, Duque went to the queen's palace. Azhara was obviously surprised that Duque had agreed to watch the dance. After all, Duque had been using work as an excuse to avoid the invitations of the High Elves. For a period of time, Azhara almost thought that Duque was a stubborn demon who was extremely self-disciplined and difficult to deal with. With Archimonde's arrival and the supply of high-purity demonic crystals to the High Elves, as well as the news she received last night, Azhara's view of Duque had changed. Before Sargeras arrived, her dream of becoming the Demon Queen was temporarily over. The commander of the army, Archimonde, was also a typical warrior, a boorish man. Azhara, who could not find any connections, seemed to want to invest more in Duque. Duque saw through this but did not point it out. After all, Queen Azhara was not a good person. Invest. Just invest as much as you want. In any case, regardless of whether I succeed or fail, you will suffer a loss. If I can't make you die, consider it my loss. Duque made up his mind. If Azhara dared to throw a sugar-coated bullet at him, then he would eat the sugar and send the bullet flying back. After some small talk, Duque sat on the sofa beside Queen Azhara's lounge chair. With a look from Queen, the band next to her immediately started playing. Unlike the pure and natural Night Elves' music, the High Elves' music could be said to be decadent. This was an era without violins, but there were harps and unknown stringed instruments similar to the zither of the Night Elves. Accompanied by the provocative sound of the harp and soft percussion, the heavy curtain that covered the roof suddenly opened. It was an elven girl with fair skin. She danced a rather gentle elven dance to the music. The accompaniment gradually became more intense, and the girl's dance became more and more relaxed. Soon it was no longer that relaxed. Duque could feel the explosive feeling in his mind. She threw Duque a flying glance, her snow-white dress fluttering in the surging wind. Following the ever-changing rhythm, the elven girl kept moving her fair and flat abdomen. Her 5 fingers that were as white as spring onions gently spread out, her pinky and ring fingers curving inwards towards her palm. Intentionally or unintentionally, she stuck out her Atlank Mountains. That's right, it was not as high as Tyrann's, but it was still a grade lower than the Atlank Mountains, and it had the whiteness of a snow mountain. Obviously, Night Elves would not have such skin color. Duque could even feel that this should be some kind of exaggerated magical transformation. Queen Azhara was also very efficient, coming up with it in one night. Duque suddenly smiled bitterly. But this was also to his liking. At least it was better than looking at purple high elves every day and thinking that they might have a purple child. The elven girl waved her perky arms with all her might. Her bare feet were as white as snow, and she displayed all of her beauty with her extremely fast and complicated body movements. The fast dance steps were like the European foxtrot. Her dancing was sometimes elegant, sometimes sensual, sometimes charming, and sometimes mysterious. Furthermore, because there was not much cloth on her upper body, only 2 palm-wide cloth straps that wrapped from the back of her neck to the front of her chest, the girl's dance also had the alluring characteristics of a belly dance, and it was too much for the eyes to take in. Her expression was so confident, so proud, so ambiguous, and so seductive. It was as if she was the goddess of beauty, Venus. Everything was so seductive and full of beauty. Duque seemed to be in a trance. It was as if the elven girl in front of him had completely overlapped with the artificial beauties in South Korea before he transmigrated. As she wriggled, a large piece of the elven girl's long skirt fell off, and he could see an opening that looked like a cheongsam from the side, revealing the sexy and slender side of her thighs. As she wriggled, she kicked off her high heels, revealing a pair of smooth and small feet. As she wriggled, the queen had quietly left the scene and the curtains blocked the surroundings. It was as if only the girl and Duque were left in the whole world. Without a doubt, this elven girl was a seductress-level beauty. Her body was a mixture of an angel and a demon. Angels had the fairest skin while demons had the most voluptuous bodies. The seductress had 2 great advantages, and that seductive dance was enough to arouse the interest of any man in the world. Looking at the elven girl who was already kneeling between his legs and secretly showing off her beauty, and looking at him with an expectant gaze, Duque's balls ached. He who was still in a state of back pain was powerless. "You're not bad. Did Her Majesty say anything to you?" Duque's lips curled into a smile. "From today onwards, I'm the possession of Lord Infernal Affairs." The girl was trembling a little. Her eyes were filled with passion and fear. She was afraid that Duque would reject her. She couldn't imagine that she had committed such a great sin and had to change her body. Her skin had become fair and it was impossible for her to change back. Just like her compatriots who had become satyrs, this transformation was irreversible. If she still wasn't accepted by Duque, she didn't dare to imagine what would happen to her when she returned. The queen had never been a truly benevolent ruler. "All right, you'll follow me. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.